With it being after 7 o'clock, I'll call the January 8th meeting to order, and we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business is the approval of minutes. Deb, did you get to read them? I did not.
I did.
Okay, motion to accept the minutes for November 20th and December 11th.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. Wait a minute, next one is 630 Turnpike Street.
So the commission will recall, this is an after-the-fact RDA application for work that was performed in the no-disturb zone involving installation of evergreen shrubs. I issued a violation letter asking them to cease and desist and file an RDA for work that would add a fence and arborvitaes in front of the fence along the rear side of the property. They had worked to submit that RDA, but in the interim, they continued to do work and install the fence and the arborvitaes, which we discussed at the last meeting. The commission discussed the paved parking lot, which has been in place for quite some time. And the applicant requested a continuance, and the commission granted that. So we still have the issue of work proposed in jurisdiction under this RDA, which involves the fence, arborvitae, and the evergreen shrubs in the no-disturb zone. Later in the evening, at the last meeting, the commission voted on issuing an enforcement order that assessed fines for noncompliance. The very next morning after the meeting, the contractor came in to inform me that all of the elements that were in the buffer were taken out. I went out to the site that day to verify shrubs were removed, fence was removed out of the buffer, so there's no remaining features in the buffer. So we're that's kind of where we're at.
Any questions?
Oh, well, yeah, I appreciate the summary. It seems to make sense. So what we still have was an activity and a disturbance within the 25-foot no disturb, but at least the physical occupation of that ground by planting the
Plants,
fence has
yep.
been taken out and
Yep.
put elsewhere.
Right.
So there was other work that was maybe further away that would have also probably fallen under our jurisdiction. That still remains? Is that what you're saying?
No, so the fence that was installed after the cease and desist was 45 feet away from the wetland. And, no,
Oh,
that was removed. That
that has
section of
been, all
fence.
right.
So everything that happened in the buffer has been removed from the buffer.
So not just within the 25, but within the buffer period?
Exactly.
Okay, I'm sorry, I
Exactly, yep.
misunderstood.
Mm-hmm,
Okay.
yeah,
Within the 100-foot?
right,
All right.
yep. And I verified that the same day.
All right. So what we really have is we have do we have an RDA that's actually before us? At
Yes,
this point, we do.
yes,
All right,
mhm.
so we have the violation
Right.
itself, which at this point cease and desist, but he's taken the stuff out. That in itself was an activity, but at least it's out of there. So at some point, we need to have a conversation of, so what is it you want to do? The RDA should be addressing that. And that's what we would normally look at,
Right.
is you know, what
Right.
would be allowed within the regulations and our policies.
Right.
And anything that wouldn't be allowed. So I guess the idea would, typically we're dealing with something that would either be a positive or negative.
Right,
But there may be a hybrid here. There may be some things that we could issue as a negative, but there's other things that we simply wouldn't allow.
Wouldn't allow, right,
So this is a little atypical of what we would
Right.
deal with.
yep,
Okay.
Yep.
I'm pretty clear on that.
exactly.
So maybe on that line of questioning of the enforcement order piece of it, maybe you can go around the table real quick on that, and then we can come back and find out, so what is it they're proposing to do?
Okay.
Because honestly, I think that some work could be a negative determination. And there may be
I
some
agree.
things that we just simply don't allow.
Right, I agree, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a few things going on with this one. The fence, which has been removed from the 100-foot buffer, that's good progress.
Yeah, that's, yep.
The shrubs, also. I was just looking at the EO, and that's actually
where the
what I'm
shrubs-
looking for.
Uh-huh.
The no disturb zone should be restored.
Yep.
As it was disturbed
Everything was break down, cleaned up, and addressed.
and replanted.
Well, there was nothing to plant. It was just,
Not at this time of year, but there
there was
will
no
be in the
grass,
spring.
it was just rough debris. That's all it was. But can I
It
just,
needs to be stabilized, though.
yeah, it has been stabilized. It's been cleaned.
Right, so, I'm just going through the issues in my mind. So, you know, our decision is whether to allow the fence and the arborvitae's to be within the 50-foot. Should the 25-foot be restored? My position on that is yes. And what else? What other question? What am I missing here? It's the chairman runs the meeting.
We'll have Commission raise it, and then you can answer any questions, or you have any questions. You all set?
Great.
I think so, unless I missed something.
Yeah, I guess, I just want to make sure that the saw cut in the pavement was truly a patch for crumbling pavement as opposed to a drain or foundation drain for the building.
The foundation drains go around the front of the building, and that's just a gutter that dumps water on top of the sidewalk, which you'll see I'm pouring the sidewalk next Monday.
All right.
And the sidewalk, I did pull a permit for the sidewalk and for the pad. The existing sidewalk was a remove and replace for the sidewalk and for the pad, the rear AC pad. The last time we were here, you spoke and said that I didn't have a permit for the sidewalk, but I did. It is on the permit. The sidewalk was a remove and replace, and the pad was a repair on the AC pad. Okay.
When you say,
But the rear sidewalk,
This is where we tripped up the last meeting.
where I disturbed, where you said where I disturbed around the building, in the back of the building, that was an existing sidewalk.
oh, okay.
Okay, so.
Around the
Just
okay,
around
I
the
got
perimeter of
you.
the building,
I
that
got
was an
you.
existing
Okay.
sidewalk.
All right,
And
all right.
the gutter and the downspout comes down right
Okay.
there and dumps on that corner.
All right,
I don't want to go down the dead end street where we were at the last meeting.
okay,
The permit there's no such thing as the permit, there may be many permits.
Yes.
There were no permits.
There was no
not,
permits.
not with
None from
Concom,
this
not
one.
with
So the-
Concom.
I
so
wasn't addressing that.
Yeah, the sidewalk that you may have done may have been shown on some, maybe planning board or zoning board or building inspector, who knows, but nothing that we ever issued.
Right.
But that's 112 feet away from Berry,
Yep.
okay?
Yep.
You know, it's just, she brought it up the last
Yep.
time, so I just
I just
wanted
want
to
to
address that.
yeah, just want to make sure.
Do we have an answer on the saw cut in the pavement?
No, because that's gonna be one of my questions.
Okay.
Well-
Because-
I'll defer.
Because the parking lot, I have issues with the parking lot, but it passed the, what do you call it when it's past the?
Grandfathered?
Yes, because part of that parking lot's in the 25, and we would never, ever approve that. And we have found, Amy went way, way back, found no approval at all, no permits done. So the parking lot was extended, and it wasn't there in between 2009, 1995 and 2001. That was after wetlands bylaw. So it was done illegally.
I can't say that.
Can I address that? Because I found some paperwork.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it permitted from conservation?
Well, let me just tell you something. I don't know if it was permit from conversation, your records on this particular building, this building was built in 1981, I have the original permit on the building, okay? This parking lot was in there from originally. There were some modifications done in it for 2001 for the basement unit, for handicap access. Those were here. you know, basically, as far as the paperwork I got, your files are totally incomplete. So you've got from 2001 on, everything from 1981 to 2001, you have not digitally uploaded. I physically looked through your file. Your file only goes back to 2001, okay? And the building was built in 1981, and there was numerous changes done. This was the changes in the parking lot for the lower unit in 2001. The parking lot was existing, but they changed, if you look at the paperwork here, and it's on file with you guys here, if they changed the structure, the way everything was parking, there was to abide for the handicap parking on the lower section for the lower unit.
Whether the parking lot was there or not was done just based on aerial photography, right?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say on the record, as a younger man, a much younger man, in the mid-'80s, my accountant was in this building. And I used to visit this building. And that parking lot hasn't changed
Okay.
from the mid-'80s.
But
You know, it may be up and down, and but the limits of it in any way haven't changed.
They changed the parking arrangement
Around
in 2001. This was, the striping and the handicap access and everything, but they didn't
But that's the building itself.
around the whole building, yes. They just did a new parking lot layout, which was documented in 2001, and it went through site plan review and everything else up there. I got some approvals on this that were signed on this, but the rest of your paperwork, I don't know where it is.
So he's talking about Laserfiche. When he says the rest of our files are incomplete, it's our Laserfiche online document system.
No, I pulled the hard file. I pulled the hard copy.
So that would be the planning board's hard copy.
I went down to the clerk's office, I asked them to pull, down to your office there with the building department. I asked them to pull the building plan, the building file, and I went through the whole file, and the oldest document in that file is 2001.
Conservation also, Amy?
No, we have nothing on.
No, we don't have anything.
The point I was trying to raise is the limits of the paving, the limits of the parking lot, from my very clear recollection, haven't changed. That's not to say that we would have ever approved it later than that, or today, we certainly wouldn't, but nonetheless, I'm convinced that we're not gonna ask them to take the parking lot out and pull it 25 feet away. But anything beyond that, anything that's within the 25, anything that's that side of the parking lot is absolutely jurisdictional, and we would hold it to today's standards.
Exactly.
And so I think the issue of whether the parking lot was there or not is maybe a waste of time to talk about.
The repair I made is approximately 70 feet from the line with the cut. I have 2 more cuts to make in the asphalt. I haven't done them. I have 2 more frost heaves that are in the parking lot that I need to cut out as well, but I haven't touched it.
Right. So those are activities that are jurisdictional, but we're not gonna say you can't do it because it's maintaining an existing lot.
Just maintaining existing. There's 2 more places, there's
Still
2 more.
jurisdictional, yeah.
2 more places.
There's
in
2
the
more
parking
places on the property that I need to cut up. They're further away. One of them's on the hill. There's a big frost heave right by the pad. It's sticking up about 3 inches.
Remove.
I'm gonna saw cut and remove a couple of more areas up above it and just patch it back in. I'm not hot topping the whole driveway. I'm just patching back in the areas that are deficient.
The thing of it is, you still have to file for that. Because it's in the,
It's not in the zone. The other 2 I'm talking about are not in your zone.
no, but the ones that are cut now
Yeah,
are in the 25 and the 50.
it's not in 25. It's 72 feet away.
Well, I can't, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, it's 72 feet away.
Oh, the existing saw cut.
This is
Okay, okay. And then the other 2 are.
The other 2 are going up the hill.
The west
behind the building.
side of the building.
One's directly about 10 feet on the back door to the left, going up the hill. And then there's another section that's
Okay,
right up at
that's
the top of the driveway.
All right.
My question is, what are your plans for restoring this area where the truck is parked? That's literally, it's in the 25. Are you planning on doing any restoration? Because it looks like you did some excavation
The
work.
plow guy totally destroyed everything over there, the last storm we had. So basically, the plow guy plowed that area, and, Amy can attest to what he did. He almost tore down the trees in the back. The plow guy destroyed a lot of the buffer zone and the back half of the section. When you were over there, you saw the photos, the trees. He almost clipped all the trees.
of the homeowner to maintain the property.
I understand that.
So
And-
he should,
and-
so
and
we
we've-
gotta go
we-
after the plow guy.
I've already addressed a lot of it and raked it back out, but he did some more damage on the last storm. And we are dealing with the plow guy as far as, because he's also his landscaper, to have to address all these issues that he did. He pushed curbstones, he pushed my stock, I had $2,000 worth of PVC that he destroyed, a 65-foot gutter, nobody plows 3 inches away from a tree, but he does. So, those issues will be addressed, but I just want to make one note on section 195-16-7, screening and landscaping requirements due to zoning. They basically say, side and rear yards in lots that abut residential zoning districts, the 15-foot nearest to the side, rear lot lines, landscape in addition with a 10 feet of side as far as landscaping, rear lot line, buffer zone, at least 8-foot high trees they're requesting. The trees we planted are gonna grow to about 18 feet tall, all right? And they're all also requesting a fence if we're abutting residential property.
By someone else?
That's
No,
the zoning.
this is your zoning.
Zoning regs.
Zoning regs, yeah.
Regs.
I'm just telling, this is what they were requesting when we were in zoning. That's the only reason,
The
yeah.
zoning says that you have to have a 40-foot side yard setback, and that results in a building getting within 50 feet of a wetland. The answer is, zoning tells you you have to do it,
I'm
and we
not-
tell you you can't do it.
I'm
So-
not tell-
But
I-
you're reading
listen.
it, you can't meet that screening requirement. You can't meet that zoning.
Well, I'm just telling you,
Conservation.
because the owner originally told me everything was all set with this, okay?
Yeah,
So, because he went through all the hearings on this and everything else. So I was under the impression that everything was all set.
Yeah,
Okay, so-
I'm not blaming you.
All right.
I'm just saying,
No, I'll take responsibility for what my responsibility is, but, but the amount of fines I got, I'll just have to, we'll deal with that, because there was other things that were said, because I would've removed the shrubs the first day, okay? To get $4,300 worth of fines to go all the way back to the first day, I have issue with, because we offered to remove the shrub. Multiple witnesses told her that we would pull them out, okay? She said, no, leave them in, but yet you wanted to fine me all the way back to that day,
Doing work.
okay?
I wanted them to stop doing work,
What-
so. Yeah.
like I said, I just wanna know what's gonna happen with the 25, because that's a mess. And I'm-
actually have an RDA
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
from the last meeting, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Look at my packet, I'm not
Okay.
seeing the
The
forms.
fence is only
Is it
about
this
50 feet
plan
away.
that he's looking to, this is what he's looking to do?
I hate to say that, I would've let the fence stay.
The fence and on the back half, all I'm requesting right now, that fence was gonna be 50, about 50 feet, 47 to 50 feet. Where it originally was, when I took it out, is where it was, and that was, I think you measured it at 47 feet. So we were between 47 and 50 feet away with the end of the fence. And as far as the arborvitae's, we were planting those down to one arborvitae past the fence. So you would still be about 40 feet away, and those were basically there to be put in to block out that whole building for the neighbors behind us, so
I don't have a problem with the fence.
that's all I'm requesting, so if you wanna give it to me, you don't wanna give it to me,
What
that's
is
totally up to you
before us?
guys.
Is it this drawing? Is this what the proposed activities he's looking at for us to
Yeah,
act on?
but we can cancel all the shrubs on that 25
On
foot
the
zone.
25.
Nothing, they're out,
So he
I'm not
wants
putting
to
nothing in
do,
there.
he wants to do the fence back here.
That hasn't been fixed.
Yes, it will be addressed, it will be fixed.
That's the only part
the
that I really
commission-
care about.
It's a
I mean,
te-
I did care that the parking lot was in the 25, but Mr. Lynch says it's been there forever. So I gotta believe him, because
It's been there since 1981, since they built the building.
So the
And there was an
commi-
older building on the property before that as well.
but we have these saw cuts that you have to file for.
Okay, that one saw cut, the other two I don't need to, right?
Yeah, as
Repainting
long,
the lot, or you just-
No, hold on, I'm just doing
Doing
patchwork.
patches.
I'm doing a total, I think, 3 to 4 patches in the parking lot.
that's fine, that's maintenance, but they still have to be filed. She has to go out, she has to see what, you tell her what you want to do, and we go from there. But, because digging it out, and now she's gonna try and dig the stones. I was in the paving business.
I
so know.
filled the stones back in right now so nobody would damage your cars. I had already had it set for a patch, but, yeah.
just a
Well,
little
there's no
bit.
lip no more, I filled in with stone.
Stone, okay.
But now I gotta shovel it all back
All
up.
right, all right. So I think the commission could issue a negative determination for the fence and the arborvitae's and the patching of that section of pavement. and leave out, well, he's withdrawing the request for the shrubs along the 25.
Or we should require the restoration of.
And then under,
ground.
right, and then under an enforcement order, you could just say, dictate what you would like to happen in the no disturb zone.
It's Bob, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
You did the right thing, at least you thought you did, taking the arborvitae out, because you thought maybe we weren't gonna like them.
Well,
those
shrubs were transplanted from the front, I don't know if you know the building.
Are they,
They're gone, they're gone.
so they're already gone?
They're gone.
So it's not like you're gonna
I couldn't.
You don't have them stockpiled
I
anyway?
couldn't save those again.
All right.
I mean, if you would like us to plant some more arborvitae's there, I have no issue with it.
Let me
You know what I
tell you
mean?
why I say that is, look at how you plow this thing, and we do have a resource area there. The arborvitae actually helps your reckless plow driver from stockpiling over there.
I thought so. I thought so. I thought it did, okay?
But I could wait.
I mean, if you would like some arborvitae's there, I'll plant them and,
No, I'm just
you know,
offering that as a discussion.
you know.
I think at the very least, looking at restoration, but I think patching, we want to be able to say, we want to know enough that the work you're doing is only patching.
Yep.
That it needs to be protected from any runoff while it's being patched.
Yep.
The land that is disturbed from the prior work gets restored when the weather permits. And,
He's
and I
planted,
think beyond that, if the plan shows it all that you want to do.
yeah, he's planted all new sod up in the front because right now, instead of doing the ramp, I'm doing a sidewalk
I
up
think
front.
the plan is a little bit, has changed based on the discussion I'm hearing, that the arborvitae's within the 25-foot no disturb, those are no longer proposed under the RDA. There's a trench that's not, or a saw cut in the pavement that's not shown on the RDA plan. And is it clear where are you accurate where the fence and the arborvitae stop on the row of black American arborvitae? Is that where you're proposing, or are you proposing something less
Arborvitae's
than
all
that?
around the back, because if there's a tree, yeah, there's a
I
big.
think the way to do this is to have a plan that proposes what you plan to do, that show these things that are jurisdictional. They're minor changes for sure, but, to Amy's point, I think,
I want to stay 50 feet away from everything, you know? If that will accommodate it, you know?
I'm just
With the
suggesting
fence.
that we should consider having to make these minor changes and just,
He hasn't filed for can he put it's a hot top, you can't put the hot top on the RDA because he hasn't even asked for it.
It's gonna show on the drawing, and, he could just highlight on a plan he submits, these are the areas I want to restore. He could actually just block out, I want to do localized repair in this whole area in your jurisdiction, and we're going to limit him that, no more than, 40 feet at a time, 40 square feet at a time be torn up and repaved immediately, and that erosion controls we put in place,
We have to put erosion controls along with his fences.
yeah. But I think it's
Where
doable.
the truck is, I should say, but not where the fence is.
But he doesn't need to precisely go out and survey, where his cracks are that he's gonna fix, just
No.
along this area.
Yeah, sure. But we're
rest
trying to
of
do
the
an
repairs are up on the
RDA,
back of the
and
building
we've
going
got
up the top.
How many conditions?
Not if they show up on the plan, they're in no condition.
No, that's why I'm suggesting we do the plan, that we change the plan so to keep it clear all
Right.
the way around.
So if I were to reconvene with Robert to go through the plan again, get this conversation down on that plan and come back with that could satisfy the RDA.
We're gonna be looking for erosion controls where that pickup truck is.
Yeah, okay.
Restoration of the
Yep.
25.
In the back, I mean.
Yeah, on the back.
I'll do a
On
roll
the
of-
side.
I'll do a roll of hay.
Whatever you wanna call it.
I'll do a roll of hay,
Right.
you know, on the lower driveway on the right-hand side.
Amy on this plan, and she can show Robert.
Yeah.
So if we were to continue it, it's only for them to facilitate a cleaner plan, so the next time, it's just simply voting
Right.
a negative determination with this work proposed.
That's what we don't, because we're only allowed 3 conditions on RDA,
Okay,
and you have,
2.
well.
put it on the plan.
Well,
No,
the
no,
plan,
no,
right,
no,
the
no.
plan will show what the commission would condition.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And then,
And then be clear, walk in and walk out
Yeah, I
in 2
can make the
seconds.
changes on the plans and drop them off with Amy at some
Right.
point tomorrow.
Yeah, you're better off
Yeah.
doing it with Amy, this way we have no issues. She's right on target, you know what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And show the erosion
Yep.
control is.
Yeah, I'll just do I'll just do bills of hay, you know, right down that side. And I'll leave them there until the spring, until the landscaping is addressed,
Yeah, you have to come in.
all right?
And tell the landowner to get the new snowplow guy.
If you can see on the pictures,
I
those are
can
all
see-
brand-new arborvitae's, and he was literally inches away with the plow blade. He almost took out every single one of those trees that I planted, okay? And there were sticks marking the end of the soil, okay? So, you know, and he did the same thing, the mess that you're looking at is from him. Because when I pulled out those plants, she can testify, we had raked everything out, everything was smoothed it over. I mean, there was some snow there, but we had leveled the area and put it back to where it was, because we hand dug those plants in, you know what I mean? You know, so it wasn't like we disturbed a lot, those shrubs that were there.
Should we have some kind of barrier there, signage, fence, something? I mean, we are right, this is right up to the wetland.
It's in the well.
It's in the wetlands. And, you know, if it's even being plowed such that all the crap is going in towards that wetland anyways, shouldn't we take some affirmative action to try to barrier it or protect it?
Do you want me to put a fence up there?
Maybe. Didn't you just remove the
Maybe it was
fence
just
from
a,
there?
no, I didn't do no fence over there. I didn't do no fence over
Well,
there.
then, yes, maybe.
You know, but over there, something like, would a 4-foot fence be sufficient? Because I'll draw it on the plan, and I'm sure the owner will agree to it.
It's not a nice thing. We usually require something more permanent, like a 2-foot loose stone wall.
But on this thing, I'd be okay with a fence.
I'd be
I
okay
think
with
it's
a
higher, you
fence.
can put some plackets on it, right in the chain
That's
link
fine.
type of a thing.
Now, this is the wall, guys.
Yeah, but a
Listen,
wall, I mean,
stuck.
I'm doing all kinds of blocks over there
Yeah.
right now, so
yeah,
a row of 2
there's no
blocks
place
is
to
not a
move a
big deal
fence
to me.
or misplace it, right? I mean, it's either further in the wetland or it's on pavement.
How about I'll do this, I'll talk to him, and I'll let him know whether he's willing to do a wall or a fence. If he's willing to do a wall, is that sufficient?
Yeah, we don't want anything fancy, it's just a 2-foot.
No, it's gonna match
loose-
what I did out front, so it will be the same block.
Okay.
You know, with a cap, it'll be 2 blocks.
It's what it is, it's about barrier.
Two-
That's-
2 blocks high, 2 blocks high with a
What we
capstone.
don't want is something that,
You
it's
plowed
plowing is
over.
one thing, but if he's got a loader and he's going up over and dumping it over, that we don't want either.
No.
So you guys figure out what that makes sense and show it on the plan.
Believe me, I did more yelling at that plow guy than you guys can even imagine, okay?
Okay, so we're gonna continue to the next meeting, which will be,
January 22nd.
and we're gonna suspend the fines from moving forward, correct?
Well, you stopped finding me already.
Yeah.
From then-
No, we're gonna suspend the fines from this day forward,
Okay.
so we don't,
No, you stopped from the day after the last meeting, so.
Yeah.
which
we
was-
did.
When he
was
filed
nice.
it, we stopped it.
Yeah.
okay. What else? Is there nothing else? Any more questions?
I think that's good for now.
Okay, so we're gonna continue. What's the next meeting?
January 22nd.
January 22nd. Does that work for you?
So I'll come down, see Amy,
Yes.
address it. I'll speak to Mike tomorrow before I come see Amy, and then, I'll see whether he wants to do a fence or a wall.
Great.
So if he wants to do a wall, it's a 2-block high wall with a top cap, and if so, it's a 4-foot fence, chain link or wood?
Chain link.
Chain link?
Chain link.
Okay, all right.
Thank
All right,
you.
Okay.
no problem. Thank you.
All right.
Yep.
Robert, I might not be in tomorrow, so we should maybe email for a time to meet.
How about Friday?
Friday, I'm in the morning, 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
I move to
Thank you.
continue to January the 22nd.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Next one is 242-1760, request to continue to 122.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Next one is 242-1766, 1600 Osgood Street, request to continue to January 22nd.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. Next one is 242-1776, 805 Forest Street.
The commission will recall opening the hearing at the December 11th meeting. This project involves the construction of an in-ground pool with a cartridge-style filtration system, associated patio, and fencing. The plan met all of your requirements. There weren't any further requests for information. The commission continued the hearing because we had more than 21 days between the next meeting, so we just continued. I drafted a decision, and that's really what was pending at all. So I have a draft decision for you tonight, so you can close the hearing.
No question.
I have no questions.
Deb?
It's on here.
Sean?
There was nothing else for us to discuss, it was just continuing the 21-day period? No questions?
Okay, motion? Motion?
Move that we close this, issue a decision within 21 days.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. Next one is 242-1777, 500 Great Pond Road, North Andover Country Club.
So this is similar to the last one, that the commission opened the hearing at the December 11th meeting, reviewed the project, the plan met your requirements, you didn't ask for any additional information. The planning board closed last night and issued their decision on the project. So that process is done.
Resulting in no changes to what was presented to us.
Right, yep, right. And so it was a matter of continuing because of the 21 days and drafting the decision.
Any questions, Jack?
None.
Deb?
No question.
Sean?
No, sir.
Motion?
Move that we close and issue a decision within 21 days.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. You're all set.
I see, we're also last on your agenda tonight. Is that, do I have to stick around?
No, that's just for,
You don't.
that's just for the
Decision to be
decision.
issued.
You don't have to be here for that.
Yeah,
You're welcome
Great.
to, but why bother?
Thank you.
Yeah.
thanks.
I'm sure there's some other you
Yeah,
have to do.
thanks.
Next one is 242, no number, 461 Summer Street.
Okay, so this property's been before the commission a couple of times. In September of 2009, there was a tree removal request that approved removal of 2 trees and keeping 1 maple tree. In October 2017, a violation letter for excavating a pool patio and with the intention of expanding the patio, replacement and installation of a shed at a slightly different angle that housed the pool mechanics and shrub removal. That violation letter resulted in an RDA being filed in November of 2017, at which point the commission was able to properly permit those activities. That RDA required that wetland markers be installed and plantings, mitigation plantings be installed. There was a chain link fence and a play structure that was discussed as well during that RDA. Those features were allowed to remain. I visited the site with Field Inspector Ben to follow up, to just partly to make sure that the plantings and the markers were installed. The markers were installed per Jen Hughes's direction. The owners have been trying to plant that area, but the plants haven't been doing too well, so I provided some other recommendations of possible shrubs that would do well in shady, wet areas, so they're gonna be trying that next. So this new notice of intent is for a 15 by 23 addition with a crawl space foundation at the westerly side of the house and construction of a small 1 to 2 foot high landscape wall and removal of a walkway in that area. The addition will be about 80 feet from the edge of bordering vegetated wetland. Stockpile areas are shown, construction access is shown on the plan. The project engineer is here this evening, so I'll turn it over to him unless you have questions for me.
For the record, Jack Sullivan, Engineering Group. I think Amy basically hit on the extent of this project, but I do want the commission to know, we did go before the zoning board on this. They needed a side yard variance on the side yard setback. That was granted. Also know that there's no trees to be cut as part of this project. You can see there's an existing septic system in the front yard. We meet all those setbacks as well. So I show a construction entrance. They'll use the existing driveway. I put a note on the plan for the contractor to use caution when they cross over any of the septic components. And we show the soil stockpile area outside of the 100-foot buffer zone.
Pretty flat site, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually, the retaining wall I need is out in front of the site. There's a little hill on that side. So the foundation's gonna be lower, so that's why I have a 1 or 2 foot high wall there. So I don't have the grade coming right back to their foundation. And the only other thing, DEP didn't issue us a file number, so we can't close tonight. I'm thinking with the holidays, they just didn't issue, but we're gonna call DEP tomorrow and make sure they received everything, and it's just a matter of the holidays that they didn't issue.
I have no question. Pretty clear.
Did we discuss the existing shed in the 25-foot notice? Yeah, can you refresh our memory on that?
So that shed was in existence when the property owners bought the house in when did you buy? 2009. And it housed the pool mechanics. I think the shed was falling apart, and they constructed a new shed and angled it slightly different than what was there before. But it was pre-existing and discussed at length during the RDA process in 2017. I watched the video. But allowed this to remain.
Was I at that meeting?
I don't remember.
And it houses the mechanics.
Yeah, it does.
Mechanical
Yep,
for the pool.
yep.
Wow.
He says, what do you mean by the mechanical equipment, like the pump and?
The pump
Filter.
and
The filters?
filter.
So far, no, it's not that far away, I guess.
Okay, it's not part of the existing proposal. I have no other questions.
I just have one. How far is it between the septic field and the tank? That's you wanna go in between, right?
Yeah, there's like 10
tight.
feet, it's tight.
Okay,
But there's no other way to access that
there is
area.
no way. There is no way, because you'll destroy the walk.
D-box right there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, it's just,
And if they're just gonna do a crawl space, Lou, they can probably come in with like a mini excavator. They don't have to come in with a bigger, we're not digging a full cellar hole here.
well, you
It's
have to,
concrete, you almost have to pump it. That's the hardest thing.
Right,
Digging it's pretty straightforward.
yeah, you won't get
Backhoe.
cement trucks in, so, right.
all right, that's gonna do with us, the start of the buffer, but I hate to see the guy go for a septic system,
Yeah.
that's close. No questions?
Also,
No question?
Okay, motion? Oh, we can't, we gotta continue.
Right, so we'll hopefully get a DEP file number. I'll draft a decision, and we should be able to close and issue next meeting.
So we have a motion to continue to the 22nd?
22nd.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Yes, unanimous. Thanks, Jack.
Great, thanks.
Next one is,
Mr. Chairman, we've, the next item almost needs to be heard concurrently in a different sequence with the action from lower down. We'll make sure we do it that way.
Yeah.
I have to recuse myself. So it's 2-4, we're gonna do the enforcement order first. So that's 242-1692, 1210 Hoskins Street. That's what you want to do, right, Joe?
Is that how you want
Yes.
to do it? Okay, right. So, there's a few items of catch-up to do on this project. We'll do that later. I'll get to that in 1 second. All right. So, right around Thanksgiving, in consultation with GEI, our peer review consultant, we had asked the applicant just to provide an update as to where they were at in terms of their timeline and monitoring plans for the trench system in terms of operation of that and pH monitoring and such. So your packets have that response in there for sort of where they're at with that. I asked for an updated pavement maintenance plan that was also provided. pH monitoring data was provided through December 1st. GEI received that information, and there was some correspondence with questions back and forth for that. And then early in December, we had some stormwater management issues on site that needed to be addressed. Basically, ponding in the pavement parking area in front of Building D, which is occupied, needed to be pumped because the catch basins were pretty much clogged. And so the methods for that treatment needed to be addressed, and that resulted in an enforcement order requiring frac tanks, going back to the Commission's April 26th enforcement order required frac tanks for any dewatering on site, whether it was construction control or pH treatment. So we're catching up on that. As part of that site visit after the enforcement order for the stormwater management, we observed a seep coming out of the westerly corner of Building B that turned out to be high pH seep, and so another enforcement order was issued right after that to continue the treatment of that, which they actually immediately addressed once they found out that it was a high pH seep. And then from there, it gets a little, I need everyone else to kind of step in to talk about all of the technical aspects, but, so it's sort of an overview of kind of what's been going on since we last saw the.
Matter of housekeeping is, Lou's recused himself,
Yep.
and I'll be chairing for this discussion. I'm not gonna bother moving chairs, changing seats. So, I think a lot of effort that you've showed over the past year or so has been very, very admirable, but I still feel like there's a lack of confidence on my part, or concern, that you guys, as an entity, have a real understanding and control of how water is moving from upper reaches of the site that would have typically been outside of our jurisdiction, how they find their way down to lower reaches of the site, near or within our jurisdiction. And I think from the beginning of the concern, that you guys jumped right on and understood the concern, we always had hoped that the influence from above would require us to extend our jurisdiction beyond what it normally would be, and that would be simply, setbacks by buffer zone. But my feeling is, at this point, that our jurisdiction does extend across the entire site, and that there needs to be, and there's lots of reasons perhaps, change of management, change of supervision, change of methods, but there needs to be an ongoing and continuing effort of how it is that rainwater, surface water, and water that moves through the ground finds its way down to the low areas, resulting in turbid water that needs to be collected and controlled and filtered and whatnot, and discharged, and what it contains chemically, particularly with regards to pH, because what we see happening there is a continuing concern of ours, and I'm sure it is of yours. I think beyond that is, we're now at the crux of the boundary between jurisdiction, between what is one development entity and another development entity. And a clear baseline understanding needs to be undertaken, studied, and analyzed, and established to then prevent any future finger pointing of where the influential waters or contamination may be coming from between the two entities. I'm a little shocked, and if not outright embarrassed, to not understand that there were two separate developers here. The commercial piece. What?
That's recent, so.
Yeah, so I
So-
think our permit is all in,
I still don't get. So can somebody explain what you're just talking about? There are two different developers here?
so our permit was for the site to an entity, the applicant, which was Princeton Properties.
Yep.
There is now, my understanding, a separation of development responsibility and development authority and development goals taken on by another party. The commercial aspect along the roadway itself, a separate entity from Princeton. But now, since it's separate, and the influential soils or the influential water or runoff or the influential issues need to be understood. We can't simply say that they have sold off the development rights to the problem. Therefore, it's their problem. Don't want that to happen. And without an understanding, without their demonstrating an understanding of how the water moves through or across that site, demonstrated now for a couple of years. And we raised this issue way, way back in the beginning, you know, when we had asked for some geotechnical data and understanding where groundwater profiles were and whatnot. And we took a leap of faith to say that, you know, if they can control it down here, we don't necessarily need to worry about that unless there's an influence coming from there that we need to concern ourselves with. I think we're there, that there is an influence.
Just to clarify, Dan Brenner on behalf of NRP Group, I'll let the experts speak about the understanding about how the water's flowing. But just for the record, there was no sale off of that parcel. That has always been owned by separate entities from day one.
But is it clear to say that it's a single permit and the applicant was a single applicant?
That was before my time, but I believe that is true.
Yeah.
I believe that's true, but it hasn't been anything that has changed in the recent months or years. It's always been that.
I'm not suggesting anything suspicious.
Just wanna
yeah,
clarify.
I'm saying that the issue of separating the issue and assigning responsibility becomes critical between the boundary of those two areas.
Agreed.
Joe, when you used the term, there was only one applicant. Applicant for a building permit you're referring to, or applicant to come in front of for the work that we permitted?
Our permit, the NOI that was filed with us, single applicant
Yep.
for the entire site.
For the entire site, including the area that we're now discussing?
Correct. So I think those are the
That
types
makes
of
it
things
easy.
that continue to concern me, and then this latest understanding that there's someone else who's gonna be involved, only muddies, no pun intended, muddies the water a little further. I think we clearly need to understand that they understand how it is they're going to undertake the construction and what sort of sequencing. The area that, as it's being developed and has been developed with buildings and pavement and whatnot, is confining their ability to manage construction runoff, because there's simply not as much real estate left available up there. So I think a real effort needs to be presented to us to tell us how it is they're going to do those next phases. Because what we're seeing in just two simple events is pooling of water through a seep down near our jurisdiction that the construction folks pumped on their own volition. Maybe they thought it was the right thing, but they didn't prove that they didn't make a right decision. They pumped it into a silt bag. The silt bag was overpowered. It resulted in turbid water being discharged directly into the resource areas. And measurement of pH within that water, it's rare that I would use a phrase that Al would typically use, is astronomical. You know, 11 pH is pretty bad.
That's actually not accurate.
It's not accurate?
Conflating two different issues. Maybe
Yeah.
Paul or Mike
The-
can explain.
Just to correct, the water that was ponded had a balanced pH, give or take pH of about 7. The water measured at the upland, I'm gonna call it the upland seep, that was just to the western corner of of Building B, that's the one that had the seep water
They were
itself.
very close proximity to each other, aren't they?
Correct, but the seep had the elevated pH of 11.5. The ponded water was a normalized or average pH of a 7.
Okay,
So,
I do
right.
stand corrected, but they were, those two locations are adjacent to each other.
Yeah.
Correct.
The
Yeah.
seep is upstream of the ponded area.
And again, I
feeds it,
say all of that because up to this point officially, I think and even it's not official yet because we have an extended jurisdiction. We've always worked within our jurisdiction as far as where RCA could go and how it can be used and in the measures that they've taken. You know, we're within our jurisdiction clearly, but now because we have impacts that are direct impacts coming from areas outside of the buffer zone, that gives us the authority to extend our jurisdiction. And I think that it needs to be clear that we intend to do that, because we are getting impacts. And what I don't know is in the course of our talking about the various ways we're gonna remediate or handle the runoff and construction was always limited to that lower corner, but I think it needs to be much broader now. So again, that's just the general background of what I understand, what I'm hoping to accomplish here. And I think the purpose of looking for the update, and maybe all that stuff's what they're gonna present tonight, by the way. That would be wonderful. That's why I wanted to deal with an update on the enforcement action first, because it does dovetail into, so what do we do with an extension? And how do we do the extension? So let's get into the enforcement piece of it.
Would you like me just to introduce this here, and then, Mike, I don't know if you want to start, or if you want us to, however.
So just to add on to Joe's comments here, I think you summed it up well. I hope the commission understands if there's any questions before I move forward, I'm happy to address them.
So when we use the term seep, what do we mean? When seeping from where, when we talk about the building B?
Sure, there is a curb cut that ties into pavement, and at the base of that curb cut,
Can we pull just an overall drawing up, because it may be
I mean,
helpful to point.
sure.
yeah,
So picture a normalized curb cut ties into pavement. At the intersection of the curb and the pavement, there was groundwater coming out from that joint, if you will, and that water had a pH of 11.5, so it was at the ground surface.
and was there any way to measure why was it coming out? Was there a lot of rain coming out at the time? Was there
That's
an
one of
event?
that's one of the questions we're working with the NRP group to understand, and we've asked them to look into.
And were you able to determine the rate of water coming out, or in any way, shape, or form?
We don't have that information at this time. Of the seep?
Yeah. It was, this is something that has been intermittently observed in response to rain events throughout the project. Before there was paved, there was, at times when there's high rain, it would come out from underneath the side of the adjacent to building B. But the flow rate, even at its, I'll say the peak of what we've observed, you're talking about something that's less than a garden hose, about maybe a gallon a minute at most. So we're not talking about a huge volume of water that's come out. With the pavement, it helped to contain it. It did find a path after the recent rain event. It came out in response to that. Basically, a sump well was installed right in the vicinity of that, right into the pavement, and that water was collected. 100% of it was then directly pumped into the frac tank and then the subsequent treatment of the system. No, the interceptor trench is in a different area. It's on the most down gradient part of the site. That collects all the groundwater that goes off on the face of the interceptor trench, which is over.
The wall, the building, the parking lot driveway, the little circular drive, and that corner right across the street from that area, correct?
So the groundwater flow direction basically runs from Osgood Street across the site to where, maybe it'd be a good idea to bring a picture up of the entire site. Do
I
we have
don't,
something?
of course.
Do we have a
Of course I
picture?
don't have that. I don't have a plan that I can project. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I don't think so.
But basically, if anyone that's gone by the site, the water flow direction.
I know this is
Oh,
just one, but
that's
if you want
fine.
to hold it up or do.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
Floor is yours, as they say.
Sure. So, okay, so if everybody can see this, let's see what I'm looking at. Okay, so Osgood Street is at the top of the image, right? Groundwater flow direction is generally in this direction. It's like this. And the interceptor trench that we have is on the property line. It extends from all the way past building D, along the property line, and then around the corner of building D here. Okay, so anything that is running down gradient here is captured by the interceptor trench. The interceptor trench was installed as a pipe and stone that intersects several feet into the till and into the fill. So anything that runs, basically our conceptual model of the way the water moves across the site is it runs on top of the till and it runs down gradient.
Through the fill material.
Through the fill material,
Yep.
right? Because the permeability of the fill is much greater than the permeability of the till. So it takes the path of least resistance, runs down gradient, down.
Fill being natural fill or CP?
It's a combination of, most of it is a sandy fill. There's some that is RCA too, yes.
Okay.
And so the interceptor trench basically acts as a safeguard against anything leaving the site. That's all collected by pumps from a few clean out sumps that we have at low points. That's pumped into a treatment system. It's all monitored. We have a combination of two systems. We have, so anyway, that's how that works there. Is that we understand
Yes.
that part?
Well, then show where the seep is there.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Sorry. So the
Okay.
seat is on the south, as Amy says, in the southwest corner of the building. It was about right here, I believe. No, I'm sorry. Is that right?
I think I put 11.5 to near.
Yeah, that's about where it is, right there, right on the mark, right. It was in this vicinity here. On the down gradient side, so basically coming out here.
Before we get that back, would you just point out so that everybody sees the locations of the frac tanks?
So there's a couple areas where they are. So the interceptor trench discharges to a system that's been designed. It's in the garage. It's in one garage that's been dedicated. That garage is adjacent building. I'm sure it's shown on here. But it's essentially off of, actually, it's one of these, it's this garage that's right here. Okay, and then the discharge of that goes into an adjacent low spot, which I believe is on one of the swales. It's not shown on here, but basically it goes into a down gradient swale. We walked that the other day, and the discharge is going into that. So that's the water from the interceptor trench. The water from the drains off everywhere else at the low point that's basically collected in this area down here, the low spot in this area.
So this is surface runoff
Surface
now.
runoff.
Yep.
That's collected in the frac tanks. There's two sets of frac tanks. There's the frac tanks that are basically adjacent to building D, right in this area here. But there's also a bunch of frac tanks that are over in this area as well. Okay, those frac tanks have the ability to do pH adjustment and filtration as well as settling before they get discharged. Primary discharge for those tanks is in this area right here. That's a little bit different area.
Were those in use when we had the turbid water?
They were.
The frac tanks were in use?
They were.
There was one, and they had to add another.
We had a combination, I'm getting to that, but we have a combination of a few events. But essentially the idea is the rain stores that are gonna function as permanent drainage across the site are not activated yet. There's a reason for that, that we have a gentleman here that can speak to that in more detail, but, so these tanks are only supposed to be a temporary measure. The idea is that the interceptor trench where the system is housed in the garage is going to treat what we call groundwater, and that the tanks, until the rain stores are activated, are basically taking control of the water that's in the surface water, that drains down to that low spot. That sort of makes sense?
Thank you.
People, a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
On the cutoff, let's call it the cutoff sump that you put in for the seep by building B. The rates of recovery you're seeing mirror kind of what your observations were of about 1 GPM,
Yeah, or less.
give or take.
Small.
Nope, great.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned a groundwater flow direction, a general groundwater flow direction. What was your basis for that? Do you guys have other groundwater elevation data, or is it just based on general topography?
It's based,
It's basically topography, Mike. I think that it's topography and the surface of the till, you know, before, you know, basically the original ground surface before fill was placed.
Okay.
You know,
You guys must have access to whatever the geotechnical work was undertaken by Hancock as part of the design process. We don't have that. I mean, does it exist? I mean, are you hypothesizing?
No, there was some geotechnical work that was done by Kevin Martin. I don't know if you know
I don't.
Kevin, but there is a geotechnical report that was done, you know, before we were involved with the project, and so there is that report. But it was, I guess I will say that, you know, in looking at it, it really focuses on, you know, structures and foundations and foundation design, as opposed to, you know, groundwater depths and flow directions and the thing. It's not a hydrogeologic report. It's a geotechnical report that's intended to be used to size foundations. But it does have subsurface data. I mean, it's got test boring logs, you know, test pit logs, you know, those, you know, so it has.
But groundwater was counted for that as well.
That's right. It'd be on those logs, and there's probably.
Is there any thought that part of what we're seeing moving down through here is some sort of a groundwater layer that's simply finding its way through this film material that's risen up through surcharges or whatever that's moved this water up?
I guess I'll say that particular location, to me, I was involved in it, and I saw the site, you know, last spring before it was paved, all right, and there was, you know, water, you know, a spring, or there's groundwater coming out of the ground at that, very close to that same location last spring, okay, and I think it's, and I think if you walk through the wetlands, you know, that are down hill of the site, you see the same thing. I mean, you see seepage outbreaks, you know, where the groundwater comes out of the glacial till just because of the you know, where the ground gets steep, you know, the groundwater will pop out of the ground during periods of, you know, wet periods of the year when the groundwater's high. And so I guess my point on that is that I saw that area where there was some seepage there, you know, before the site was paved, you know, back last spring, okay, and then it kind of dried up in the summer and the fall, and then it's kind of manifested itself in a similar location again this time when in the stretch of, you know, wet weather we've had, and things aren't really frozen, so it's kind of it's almost, as far as the groundwater is concerned, it's almost an early spring. So it's.
So is there any concern? I mean, I think we're agreeing that it may have been there all along, and it just, depending on the hydrologic conditions.
It's not a result. I don't think that the seepage outbreak at that particular location, I don't think is from new construction or fill being placed. I think that specific area was prone to seepage outbreaks.
Well, that's where I was just going to go with my line of questioning, is that because it was outside of our jurisdiction, and because the construction activities included placement of recycled concrete aggregate up in those upper reaches, is there any concern, and I think maybe the measurement of pH might be the proof of that, that the water that's moving down through that fill, that's now encountered this even small but nonetheless present in infrequent seep, is that resulting in the spike of the pH level at that outlet of that discharge of the seep? I think it has to be. There's no other source for it.
Is this a rhetorical question?
No, that's exactly what we're driving at, is that we were, as tough as we were, I think we were pretty reasonable in keeping our jurisdiction within our limits of the buffer zone. But I think now we have proof positive that we have impacts, both in erosion and construction activities and siltation moving down, but also with the pH and the elevated levels coming down from those upper reaches, which I think causes us to have to say, so what are you gonna do about it, because we're extending our jurisdiction.
Yeah, and I know you keep using that term, extending our jurisdiction. I think our
I think it is our jurisdiction.
Right, I don't think it's an extension. I think our jurisdiction is things within a certain distance of a wetland and things that outside of that area that can impact it. So I don't think it's an extension of our jurisdiction. It's just an area of our jurisdiction we usually don't find ourselves dealing with.
Agreed, I completely agree. Thank you for the clarification.
The word impacts have been used several times about impacts that you may think that we've experienced. And I want to make sure that the commission's received Mr. McManus's report, his sixth monitoring report, and also his wetland evaluation report. There have been no impacts to the wetlands since the trench drain went in, and we've been working extremely hard to ensure that. So I may be a little sensitive to it, and I apologize for hanging on words, but when we use the word impact, I mean, the wetlands are for all intents and purposes looking, so I
think what we're concerned with is that the potential is clear, and that our jurisdiction is real in the expectation that this very capable team be dealing with it and reporting to us of how it is they're gonna prevent those impacts.
Yeah, I don't think anyone here has even suggested that, you know, that's none of your business, stop asking these questions. Any question that's being asked, we are working hard to answer.
Clarification, maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, I think what you were touching on the pH, groundwater running through fill, was that there was a cause and effect, that the naturally occurring pH of groundwater is not 12. Yet we're observing that on the seep that we believe runs through, the RCA fill. So this is a condition that was caused by the construction and the construction on site, and it needs to be dealt with now as part of the project.
And but for the remedial impacts that have already been put in place, it would impact the wetland.
And my fear is that we granted some, not some leniency, but we didn't pay much attention to the stormwater analysis and the stormwater design back at the original permitting, to the extent that I could almost remember it, and correct me if I've got it wrong. And you folks weren't there for that, so you just have to rely on my recollection, that we asked Hancock about the infiltration, and not so much, we had no concern of high pH or RCA. We were just concerned about infiltration and peak runoff. And the answer that I remember getting, I remember it vividly, is that it doesn't really matter whether we're in till or good gravel or not. Our calculations didn't account for any groundwater infiltration. Our sizing of the system, the storage of the water within those chambers themselves, is the mitigation from peak runoff. And any infiltration that you get into the ground as by way of recharge is only a benefit as a BMP. It's never analyzed. And we asked. And in the end, we're satisfied with the answer because our third-party review consultant who looked at the stormwater looked at it strictly from a peak runoff perspective. And it was a correct answer at the time. But what we really don't know is, so now we have material. We now have water moving through a high water table or a groundwater condition. I hope that we're continuing to, in the longer run, we'll collect the stormwater into a system that's get infiltrated, but Where that ultimately lies, are we getting any influence of simply introducing water into areas prone to high groundwater, moving forevermore through the RCA, and in doing that, creating a high pH condition for some unknown period? And I don't think anybody's ever looked at that. I don't know, maybe these guys have. I thought when you were saying, we'll talk about why we're not using those storage areas as part of construction runoff, I thought that's where you might have been going.
No, they're not, I don't want to speak out of turn, but my understanding is they're not fully ready to be used yet. There's reasons, construction reasons why they haven't been brought online, right? So NRP has taken the conservative stance of having basically two, I'll call it a bypass system, a system that's basically treating the runoff, and the interceptor trench system, which is basically taking all of the groundwater and managing that. They're using those systems in parallel until the rain store will be in effect. The idea that this water that is intermittently coming out from underneath Building B is an issue, is, to me, it doesn't seem like it's much of an issue from the stance that the plan is being put in place now that is going to take that water and it's basically going to incorporate that into the drainage system that already exists. So it'll be an extension of that, essentially putting in a French drain that would intercept that. That water that goes into the rain stores is going to infiltrate, and then it's going to be intercepted by the interceptor trench. It's at the downgradient property line anyway. So anything that's going to be in the middle of the site, not to say we don't care about it, we do, but it's going to be intercepted and treated, and NRP has shown a commitment and expressed a commitment that they're going to manage this as long as they need to. So that's sort of where we are with that.
Could somebody just tell me the data? I know we've been keeping data on what the pH levels were as they were heading towards the wetland in that area. Have we had any new data in that respect, and has it indicated any increases or decreases in the pH at those points?
We have an inconsistent data set currently that we're working to rectify. I think you guys were provided with the most recent graph trend line, which showed a change, in my opinion, a change of direction to a more stabilized pH level. My understanding is that the data we've received to date is only a portion of the system and not reflective of all the pH readings that should have been acquired. So,
Conversation would be more helpful if you're looking at pH monitoring data, part of the packet. Second page is an 11 by 17 sheet that shows a plot of measurements, pH measurements over calendar dates. And that would help visualize as well as hear what Mike is talking about. It's pH monitoring data is the cover. There's the plot.
yeah, that's the pre-treatment data, looking at individual data points collected on given days, and the green dots are the average for any given day.
And you were just saying, though, this is one part of, but not the entirety of?
Yeah, the back end, since the new, and Paul and Vern, correct me if I'm wrong, since the new system has gone online, apparently we've had a redacted data set looking at only a portion of the system. So where we see that trend that is sitting higher than the previous scatter plots, there's almost like a solid line. That's not representative of the data for the full system. So I expect that there will be a correction of that, but I would defer to you guys on what you guys think.
I'm not sure. Yeah, so
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. So we plotted based on the last, that would be the October and November into early December pH data. Based on that data starting in middle of October, where we had previously seen a downward trend in individual and average pH readings over time, we saw a stabilized jump, if you will, up to 11 to over 12 from that point on through the end of the reporting period in December. And based on some conversations today, I understand that data set is only reflective of a portion of the data on site.
So as I look at this data set,
That's correct.
this is the entire site, and this is limited to just a certain.
If I understand that based on the information, based on the discussion we had the other day, I understand that to be the case, yes.
And that would make a lot more sense based upon what we're seeing in this graph, right? That this is all just one area, it's pretty consistent, and this is more all over
Yeah,
the chart.
I would have expected to see a wider variation in the scatter plot compared to what we've previously seen, so I was surprised to see a leveled sort of pH.
But if we see a high, I don't want to read too much into it, so tell me I'm wrong. If we see a large number of data plots in that narrow, high reading over some period of time, and if it is limited data, does it really just tell us that wherever that data is collected, whatever, however limited it may be, that's where you have a problem?
Potentially, it's also driven by what proportion of the water that piece of the system is taking at any given point in time. I mean, there's a lot of variability in what might be driving that data set. So if that's only collecting like a third of the water and the other portion of the system is collecting 75%, that could be a very
So
different.
there's a question in here. Is the question, we need all of the data?
Correct. One of the
Correct.
questions we're looking for an update on was an update of full pH data for the site for that reporting period, or going forward if it doesn't exist.
How did it become a data?
If I understood correctly, and I'll defer to Paul and Vern, I think it was moving from a manual recording at one system to an automated recording. So when I was taking these readings, it's like Paul's tracking sheet that said pH, like the hand mark is everything, to a digital system, which I think maybe just through miscommunication didn't get fully provided, if I had to guess.
We actually have the ability to dial into the system at any time and look at what we need to look at. We have that capability in the system that's installed in the garage. We also have alarm telemetry that's installed in case we have any issues that will notify us. But the data that we have,
The difference is that because of the hourly readings? I mean, because what we're tabulating are hourly readings, I guess.
Average.
Yeah.
Provided, so.
So tell me if I'm wrong, Paul, but I think all the data that you've received in the tables and that you in turn have taken and plotted, okay, is basically representative of the pH of the influent water coming in at the front end of the treatment plant, and it's all water that's going through the treatment plant. So it's not like there's a different water stream that is not being measured. Okay, so let's be clear about that.
Correct.
Well, I think part of it too is that we have, there's a lot of it's hard to look at this. I've lived it down there. There's been so many variables that we've been doing, but I would say the data from October on, this line that's to the right is probably the most accurate, and that represents that represents when we installed the interceptor trench, we brought the interceptor trench online, and that we had the system in its current configuration. So in the earlier spans, we were controlling the water. We did not have the interceptor trench. We had a host of different sources of water. It was managed from several different, I'll call it mini systems across the site separately.
And it was more dominated by surface water, too.
It was more dominated by surface water, which is probably a function of why the pH is not what it is here.
And I would say that the part of the plot that's off to the right now is it's since the interceptor trench has been installed, and so it's more dominated by groundwater, which, would be expected to probably have a higher pH, because it's probably more dominated by water that may have been in contact with the RCA. So that's probably.
There were also some changes that happened to the flow in the course of the site, that the interceptor trench actually received more water because there were some utilities and some changes that went across the site. We noticed spikes in the flow rate of the system as that went on too. So I think probably yeah, we could talk about exactly what, and thank you for doing this, by the way. This is actually helpful, but I think the takeaway is from October until now, although it's hard to see on the scale of this image because we're taking the entire pH range.
I figured we didn't want a full D-size plot of this, but, you know, I can next time if you guys want.
But if you look at the range from the start of
Well, basically from the new
October,
setup.
from the new setup,
Yeah.
we basically, what we're trying to do, we take hourly readings, we have an operator on site, at least 5 days a week, and then a rain dependent. Most times during the fall, he was on for at least one day on the weekend, and recently he's been on every single day.
So I don't want to burn too much getting to technical stuff because we will all fall asleep because it's been a long day for everyone, I'm sure. So what I'm understanding is about mid-October at that point, we're considering that essentially the new baseline, essentially the new starting point, and we're going to start from there and ignore all previous data.
Yes, and then so what I was getting at in a long-winded way is that the operator on site is collecting hourly readings of turbidity and pH. Those turbidity and pH readings get tabulated into a daily average of an 8-hour or whatever, sometimes longer if we need to treat longer, 10-hour day. And those are the numbers that are there. So since that time, we had a daily pH average initially in the beginning of October of about 12.3. And since that time, we've had an average that pretty much ranges around 11.7, 11.8. So I think
That's improvement.
I think we see improvement. We're talking about up to a half a point, pH point that's downward. And I think that's significant, particularly when you know how pH works, and it's a logarithmic measure, not a linear measure. So even little improvements in the beginning of this process are quite significant.
Well, I also appreciate the clarification of the change in the baseline starting point. I think that makes a huge, like as opposed to considering things holistically, that as a new starting point, I think is very helpful.
And part of the confusion too might be, you know, that if we're plotting the daily averages, you're still getting the hourly readings, you know, in the table. So I think you have all data, you know, that we're recording.
I mean, again, that goes back to this miscommunication as to whether something was redacted, or you got all the data, you didn't know it. Can we be sure on that?
Right, so I mean, I guess that's a clarification
Well,
point that we can
okay.
take care of. Was I understood that we may have only been receiving for that set stretch was only for the frac tank system, not the garage system. Something we can clarify.
Okay.
And is the reason why there's an interruption in the data from like the 18th of September through the 7th of October, because is that when the trench was being put in?
Yeah, and the equipment was being moved around and reset up. Yes, that's exactly it. And so one of the other questions that Mike had posed was, we are going to, I'll add some milestones or key site activities to the table that we provide, Mike, as to when certain things happen. Okay, this was moved on this date, this was reactivated on this date. A lot of that is already there, but we're gonna add some additional things about, when, if paving was done on certain days, things like that maybe aren't there today. So we're gonna try to add more site activities beyond what's already on the table. And then I think Mike may end up taking that and annotating this graph to help future discussions.
No, I apologize, but you already had it.
So, yeah, all right, so I guess, so then, the question we need to answer is if there's other pH data, I guess, in frac tanks other than the treatment tank. Is that?
Again, the way it was explained was the pH data that we received, because obviously you guys got a report coming up at some point, was only for the frac tank system, not the garage. Did not include the data for the garage system. So you guys can clarify and let me know which is correct.
We'll get an answer to you on that.
Well, that helps with the pH discussion in a big way, for sure. Especially if it's trending down even ever so slightly, that's an improvement, and that's obviously our goal. But I don't think it's still gives me a level of comfort that we know where the source of it's coming from and how it's getting there, and that once it does get there, we continue to treat it, but at some point in time, the hopes would be to wean ourselves off that. I still have low confidence of what we intend to do as we face ourselves with development of more of the paved area and more of the building areas up front, and leaving us smaller and smaller areas from which we can set up temporary stilling basins, and I think we did see that they're proposing an interceptor trench and some frac tanks up along that edge there. I think, did you mention that earlier? Or-
Construction controls for the front part of the site, which is draft right now.
Still in draft?
Draft,
Okay.
yes.
So that's the necessity. We need to see how that becomes memorialized and actually gets implemented. Now, what we didn't do when you were holding the sketch up as a prop, but I'll do it, and maybe it's easier if you just do it, is, or maybe the attorney can. I always forget your name, I'm sorry. Dan?
I haven't been here enough.
So there's a clear, I just pulled that out of the parking lot dewatering part of the sketch, you got it there, good. So my understanding is the Princeton is doing the housing piece of it, and the parking lots around the housing piece of it, and the construction group for Princeton is one entity, that the front part of the lot, which is simply blank on this sheet, is going to be under the development control of another entity, and more than likely a different contractor. And I don't know that for a fact, but more than likely.
It is a different contractor. It may be the same site contractor.
And what we have is, I have a level of discomfort of not understanding how it is we're managing what's coming our way, to be coming down gradient from there to begin with, when it's one entity. The permit doesn't distinguish separate entities. Like, I think I believe that we got a single permit issued to the developer, and he is responsible for any impact regardless of who's to blame. Whatever measures they want to put in place in order to establish baseline and to sort out who's responsible for what in the future is up to them, but ultimately, we're going to be coming on the applicant.
I would agree with that. It sounds like you guys are on board with that, correct? You're not trying to say, whoa, this is them, it's not us, or that's not happening here, is it?
Well, right now, one of the main reasons there's a distinction is because we aren't able to open our rain stores until that parcel is stabilized. Because right now, there's surface flow that could get into the rain stores, and that would be a problem. So we are working, and we're tentatively meeting with the owner of that parcel next week to try to push that along, so that.
Separate ownership, or is it?
Separate.
It is separate
Separate.
ownership, not development rights.
No,
Did that happen after the application was put in front of us?
No. no.
But this application does include that front parcel.
Sure does, as in its entirety.
So the applicant applied for a permit for work that was being done off their property.
I'd have to look at the original NOI filing. That party should have been identified. That ownership should have been identified. I don't know if it was.
And perhaps that's something we can work offline with Amy and get you more information
Yep.
for the next meeting and try to, get everyone on the same page about that. But we are very much keen to it because we believe that once we can open up those rain stores, the surface water issue is going to be alleviated dramatically. And we know that the hurdle to getting there is through the commercial parcel. So we are aligned in that respect.
The absolute opposite direction. As I prefaced by saying, I don't have high confidence there's an understanding of how the water's moving from the higher elevations, higher gradients downward, as it is, to whether it's bringing the rain stores online or not, or just simply what's moving through the groundwater area. I'm not convinced that we have a handle on that now, rather than introducing another contractor, another owner into it. I just have no confidence.
So the site
Yeah?
work on that parcel is.
You want to comment, or you got a question, or you just wave?
Before I recuse myself from this project, there's one application
Correct.
for both parcels. It was my understanding Princeton Properties was gonna build a residential part, and then they were gonna do the commercial after they did residential. And we spoke before, because I went to the pre-construction meeting. And before that, we had spoken that we weren't gonna allow anything to happen until we were 100% satisfied that the residential part of it. And we also spoke before I recused myself, that when we found out about the glass and the recycled concrete, we wanted it off the site completely. They just moved it up to the high ground. And now they're gonna use it again. Now it's reinforcing what you just said. That stuff is seeping down from up high.
I'm not saying it is, I'm saying
Well,
I have no confidence, I just don't have enough, I don't have enough data to reach any conclusion at all. I don't have geotechnical information, I don't have monitoring wells, I don't have the design engineer supporting his intent of a sequencing, of phasing. I don't have a single construction entity to ask, how do you do it? How you gonna phase? I don't have any data to be able to reach any confidence level.
To me, if you sold the land, it should be a separate filing, because it's a totally different applicant. Now, who's gonna maintain the stormwater management that's in place? There's so many
I do not
questions.
wanna go
There's
there.
so
We got
many
a single
questions.
applicant.
Also, you know, you have recused yourself, so.
No, but all this happened before,
Yep,
I'm just giving
no.
you some history,
Yep,
before I
no.
recused myself.
No, I know. I just don't want to get too far down into an area here.
No, I know, but
Yeah.
I'm just,
I know you're passing on conversations you had as a non-voter concerning what happened in the process and project before you recused yourself.
right, because I went to the pre-construction meeting.
Yep.
And there was no conversation at all about it being two separate entities. Because to me, if it was me, it should be two separate filings.
Yep.
And I think we're gonna stop you short there, because I think it is our position. We have a single application, single applicant, and a single order condition issued for the entire project to one entity. How they divvy up partnership, ownership, responsibility is up, that's a business decision, they do their own. But the one responsible entity is the applicant.
Yeah, I think it's
Period.
not an opinion. I think
Period.
that's just a fact based upon the.
From what I
what was filed.
understand, you sold the land.
Still doesn't.
No?
We never had ownership of that land, sir.
Still doesn't matter, the applicant is the applicant. I could, as long as you give me permission as an owner, you give me permission to apply for a permit on your property for my own speculative purposes, you can let me apply for that permit. Doesn't make you responsible. If I get that permit and I move forward with the project, it's my project. And I think that's exactly what we have here, is we have, a couple of joint owners who under one umbrella applied for a single permit, and they've got it. And it's for the entire project. The design was that, and that's my recollection. We will review the application, but I'm sure it's the case. And I always say that, to broaden my concern, is that even if it was a single entity, one contractor, one developer, period, I think we need to insist upon, and these guys have been doing it, and we need them to continue to do it, is a single cohesive approach to deal with the minimization of construction impacts, the control of groundwater and any pollution that may be coming out or through that groundwater, and throughout the process, and at some point in time, as time goes on, to have measurements that support that we no longer need to do any of these things. And I think that's what they've been doing, and I think, the reason I wanted to take this first was because we're about to take up the discussion on the permit extension, because their first order of conditions is about to expire. So they're entitled to 2-year extensions that we have to consider. But I think in doing that, I think that we have to be very clear that of their intention of continuing, and I think that they're admirable that they're going to do that, is continue with exactly these measures for the full site.
I know before you said you don't have enough data. Is it still possible to get that data?
Well, I hope so. One, I don't know if it exists. For whatever reason, sometimes we've asked for it and haven't gotten it through the application process. these guys have been very forthright in giving us data. This conversation we just had with PH is a great example of that. Mike's concern was, we're seeing something that doesn't make sense, and their quick review of it says, it looks like you don't have all the data, and we'll get you that data. But there's other things that we don't have. For certain, we don't have geotechnical stuff. Enough information. We don't have groundwater profiles that show us where water was or where it might be now and how it might be moving through.
We'll still get that, at least where it is now, obviously.
Good.
That could be provided. We received a request, maybe 6, 7 bullet points from Mike and Amy
Okay.
on Monday. We've already started working on it.
Beautiful.
And everything you've asked for, what we have, we will provide.
And is some of that data coming from the part of the property closest to Osgood Street?
I guess that was one of the questions coming out of this, is looking around the existing condition and saturation of the RCA material and your understanding of that and how that gets addressed. And that's to Joe's point, correct?
Correct.
So I guess, do you guys have something we can add to the list of questions to address is, well, the system is capturing everything that we know of to date. We do have a groundwater seep that has come to the ground surface. So we have sort of a question mark, if you will, about how things are moving, to Joe's point. And how do we understand the movement in the subsurface so we can make sure that the system is indeed capturing everything. I think based on the information we have to date, it appears that is the case, but
Well, I think what we'd like to do is approach it this way, Mike, if we could. I mean, you could put in, because of the glacial till, the way it naturally occurs, you know, you have seepage outbreaks at isolated spots, kind of randomly, honestly, all right, depending on where the low permeability, you know, paths of least resistance are, and you can see it in the wetlands below the site. I mean, you could spend a lot of time putting in wells and getting water levels, but I don't think that's going to tell you where outbreaks, seepage outbreaks, may be occurring. Okay, and I think you want to, you know, take your hat and spin it around backwards and focus on, okay, where are the seepage outbreaks occurring, and then continue to monitor to see if there's new ones, and if they do, you address them. Okay, so yep.
Two things.
Okay.
One, I agree.
Yeah.
And I know you guys are going to look at seeps both in the upland and have been continuing below the wall. But there's some information you provide there about till movement, understanding of the subsurface that I'm not sure the commission has been provided yet. So like that's sort of background information. So there is an understanding there of what's going on.
Like I said, happy to provide the geotechnical, the information that exists. And I guess what I'll say, though, is probably when you go through that, you're probably gonna find that, okay, the groundwater is in the glacial till, but and that's where it was, you know, and there may have been seepage outbreaks, you know, on the ground surface, you know, initially, but I'm not sure that they're documented, you know, but you'll probably have logs that show that groundwater is whatever, 2 feet down, 8 feet down, whatever, but it may not tell you the story that you're trying to drive at, I guess. And I think what you're really driving at is, okay, if there's an outbreak, I want to be able to collect it and address it. You collect it and treat it. And so I think.
That's at that level of concern.
Yep.
But I think we heighten it once the storm stores, the rain stores are all online, and we're now collecting all of that water, and we're getting it down into the system. Again, with my recollection of Hancock's analysis of, we never looked at permeability of the soil because we didn't account for any, we were only looking from a runoff perspective. But I think permeability now comes into play, because if we are in fact collecting water and introducing it into a system that may infiltrate, are we in fact moving this concerned material, water, down through the water column, and does it migrate differently? Because I don't think it's ever been looked at. I don't think Hancock ever looked at it for sure. And I'm not sure if you guys have looked at it, because I don't think you have the data either.
Well, I think there's obviously the groundwater that's in the glacial till, but most of the water moving through the site probably flows along the at the top of the glacial till and at the bottom of the fill, that's at least until the site is paved. And that's why we are always advocating that, things will start improving a lot once we get the reduce the amount of infiltration that's going down through the fill material. And then now most of the flow becomes what the groundwater flow that was there before. Do you follow me there? Because that's kind of important. I mean, if you have 43 inches of rainfall a year and it's hitting the fill material and going down through the fill, and then when it gets to the till it starts flowing sideways. Now you pave the site, you got buildings and parking lots. Well, at least you've reduced the amount of water that's flowing through the RCA, but now you're down to what has always been there, which is there's groundwater flowing through the glacial till too, and so once the site's paved and has buildings on it, the amount of water that comes in contact with the RCA is going to decrease significantly, and then but there is groundwater there that's been impacted, because the site's been open for a while, and so we're continuing to collect that, and it's going to take some time to flush that through.
But to speak to I think what you're getting at, Joe, is that we've sort of gone about this in an iterative process, and I think we have quite a bit of contingency that's built into the system that maybe we don't all realize. But when we started with the well point system and collecting surface runoff in a bunch of satellite tanks, if you will, and then treating all that stuff independently and then discharging into all these different spots across the site or to drainage basins. And then as the site matured and our understanding of everything matured, we then installed 2 sumps at low spots that we saw were adjacent to where there were seeps in the wetland. And we noticed that about 99% of the seep disappeared, but occasionally there was still another seep, although albeit small, was appearing at different times. So then we took the extra step and we said, you know what? We put the interceptor trench in, which was 700 feet, laterally cross, what our understanding of is what, cross grading of the down gradient flow, and then and took that, and so
Almost double the capture area, I think, right?
Well, we basically feel we've captured everything that was going across that entire site, and so by doing that, and then we even took it one step further, and we took the pipes that drain from the perimeter drain at the base of the retaining wall, where we knew there was some RCA. We took that and we piped that directly into the interceptor trench too, to make sure that was captured as well as an extra measure, just in the event that in a high storm event that those would flow. We didn't see flow coming at them. We just took that extra step. So I think we feel pretty good about the capture zone of what we have.
Yeah.
That's there.
And I guess then to go back to the upland areas, what's the thing that we're most trying to prevent? It's basically having the groundwater manifest itself to the surface and then coming in contact with it, right? So I think, when's that going to happen? During the wettest periods of the year when groundwater is highest. I think we're willing to commit to, between now and when things start to dry out in the summer, if there's a seep, we'll put in a sump and collect it, and then include a French drain system that collects that long term permanently, and that's connected to the storm drain system. Hancock is already working on one for the seep that was discovered this week. They're designing a French drain system that will collect that water that's from that seep and direct it to the storm drain system, which in turn will go to the rain stores and then into the ground.
Go into the interceptor.
And then in addition to actually seeing the seeps, I think we could commit to monitoring, basically doing an inspection of the site, looking for additional seeps, during the wet period of the year. I don't think it's gonna be very productive to do that in the summer and the fall, but between now and the spring, sure, we can talk about what the frequency of those walks ought to be, and then looking for additional seeps.
So, I appreciate you guys looking at it from that perspective. One of the questions I wanted to kind of ask is, what's your confidence level that once the site is fully paved, the rain stores are online, and the upgradient parcel is good to go, what's your confidence that the current interceptor trench system will catch everything?
It's going to continue to catch groundwater and whatever infiltration there might be from landscaped areas, as it is today.
The contingency that you didn't mention is that you left the pump and treat system, wellheads in place, decommissioned them, but left them in place should the need arise to reactivate them, which would also be upgraded, which would be in that same direction of flow. You could reactivate those if need be.
We capped them, and they're in, they're basically hibernating, but yes, they're there.
We have some schedule constraints on the commission itself that we. If there's more that you want to say, let's get it out there now in the next, no more than 10 minutes. Otherwise, I'm probably going to conclude the discussion and open up the discussion on the extension.
I just have one last question. Could you provide an update? One of the things we asked you to look at was the potential for an imminent hazard as defined by the Massachusetts contingency plan with relation to the SEEP. Could you provide an update on where you guys are at with that?
Sure. So, we had we had a licensed site professional on our staff, take a look at, take an in-depth look at the MCP regulations and the seepage and the pH measurement. And it's basically his opinion that, we do not have a reportable condition and we do not have an imminent hazard. And we can, we can talk further about that offline or provide whatever else you need. But we did have an LSP look at it, and it's his opinion that neither of those apply.
Does he have a report?
We can provide one.
Yeah, I was going to recommend some kind of brief letter that documents your findings. Would be great.
I think given the fact that you folks have, it's a team, have residents living there, and you have construction workers and you have maintenance people, I think that's an important document to have in the file. If the LSP is willing to say that and state it, then, yeah, I think we need to see that. I've been remiss not asking, anybody else have any questions regarding the enforcement piece of it?
I have one question about it. When I look, Amy did a good job of putting together the history of the enforcement actions on this project. There was an enforcement order issued by the previous administrator, Jennifer Hughes, back in April. It dealt with, among other things, siltation, not being managed, silted water not being managed properly on the site, being discharged to the wetlands. The enforcement order was about that, that some of these silt socks were becoming overwhelmed and discharging turbid water to the wetlands above 40 NTUs. The enforcement action required better management of that, training on how to use frac tanks, initiation of frac tanks, and basically reducing your turbidity to below 40 NTU. Okay, that was what the enforcement action was all about, okay? So, in the meantime, we changed administrators. We had, the staff was a little bit thinner than normal, and maybe this project didn't get the attention that it normally did. But then in December, when Amy and her army are out there, the same condition existed. And I'll go back to the enforcement action in April. Part of that requirement was that properly trained operators on frac tanks would be, they would be trained and they would be enlisted into service so that turbid water would not be discharged to the wetland. Yet we return in December and the same condition happened. And I believe that's the point where the second frac tank came online. So, you know, and it's been a little bit of a struggle through the month of December. I guess, what do you propose to do differently on this enforcement action so that we end up having control of turbid water discharging off the site?
As part of that same point, let me just bring up what, I alluded to it in my preface to the discussion tonight. I know that large projects that extend over large periods of time, it's hard to keep your supervisory folks in place for the duration. And I know that there's been some changes to get different, and there have been different supervisors on it. Some have been really good, some have been not so good. My feeling is, my observation is, and I could be dead wrong, is that emphasis now seems to be mostly focused on building buildings and finishing off units, and not so much site work. And the site supervisor, the person who's on the site, may not be as comfortable or competent in dealing with erosion control. And that's my observation, and I might be wrong, but I think if we can say, at the very least, whoever's in charge on that site out there on a daily basis needs to be very cognizant that if he's dealing with an issue regarding runoff or erosion or siltation control, he shouldn't just be forcing himself to make decisions on his own. He needs to inform our staff immediately that something's going on, this is what I intend to do, and let us be a party to that discussion. Because I don't think that's happening. I think we're discovering these things after the fact. So now,
And I'll let Paul talk about turbidity and how often we have a trained frac tank operator out there. But I will agree with you that communication is key, and we can always do a better job about it. I will have to disagree respectfully that our focus has not been on the site. We have tremendous resources, focus on the wetlands, focus on managing the water. The incident in December was during a peak weather event. There were frac tanks running on site. It was not just one. There were many. There were several. And it was not a malicious event of a direct discharge of turbid water. This was a difference of interpretation of the April response action plan on what kind of treatment needed to take place for the water. The water was run through a treatment process. Some of it may not have gone to a frac tank per se, but it was treated. There was no direct discharge. And we are now on the same page that the commission would like all water, including surface water that's ponded on pavement, to be put through sediment treatment in a frac tank, and that has been happening since. So, Paul, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I just wanted to make that position clear. Go ahead.
All right, I'm just gonna take a minute because I haven't had anything to eat in 12 hours, so it's before I get angry here, But the idea that we have untrained staff on the site is false. I take an issue with that. We have a grade 6 operator that's there every day. You don't get any higher than grade 6. It's somebody that can operate a municipal plant. So that person is on site every day, sometimes 12 hours a day, sometimes on Saturdays, sometimes on Sundays, sometimes on holidays, to make sure that this system is operating as best we can. The water that has been measured, we haven't had a single violation of turbidity or pH in the time that we've been operating the system. The turbid water that was mentioned was something that was discharged direct to a silt bag from the site at a peak storm where we had a 2-inch storm in addition to meltwater. It was a perfect storm of events. As a result of that, and with discussion with the board, we brought an additional frac tank on site the next day in the morning. Within 2 hours of a request, we had it there to add capacity. Some additional wattles were installed that separated the active construction from the area where the drainage was around where the courthouse is. And we agreed, although the language in the SWIP suggested that, and then before that water was discharged, that, you know, the water that was looked at as turbid, that was compared to, that was looked at and observed on top of snow. So you have a background of snow in that. The water was measured with pH at 7.5 before it was discharged. The water was not measured for turbidity, so it's not known exactly what it is. So to say it was actual turbid water is I don't know if that's fair either. And then a subsequent inspection of the wetland by the entire group and the follow-up of our wetland expert, Paul McManus, indicated that there was absolutely no impact to the wetland. So I think we're doing the best. I think we're actually doing an outstanding job in the course of the year. I've spent a lot of time here personally. My employees have spent a lot of time here personally. They don't ever complain. I ask them to be here in the middle of the night sometimes when we have a rain event. We look at the rain ahead of time. We look at the weather report ahead of time to try and plan. We make sure that we have extra capacity in the frac tanks. We make sure that frac tanks are cleaned out as part of our best management practices so that we don't have additional siltation in the tanks and when we're discharging, to make sure the system's operating. These are essentially water treatment plants, although temporary, that they're operating. We have like I said, we have someone that's a grade 6 operator that has done this for his entire living. So I think we've done an excellent job. We've tried to work with everybody. They've raised some concerns that were part of the best management practices of things that were ongoing. I think we certainly heard what was said, and we addressed it in a very expeditious manner.
I can say that they respond quickly. So I guess, I mean,
Satisfy you with looking forward and addressing the isolated event?
I guess my concern is that 2 instances in December, when you came on site
Right.
and observed firsthand, you had turbid water going down, okay? Now, maybe not enough to cause an impact that you know, that you guys evaluated subjectively on your site walk, but it seems like, okay, maybe you do react well, but maybe I think what we're asking for is more proactive approach, that you prevent these things from happening. Because, I mean, twice in the span of 3 weeks, our folks come on site and they're observing turbid water. So, I mean, that's a concern. That's what we asked for, yet when we're checking, it's not happening. That's what this report is telling me.
Here's what's different, and is that surface water is being collected. You know, all the treatment systems that have been out there. You know, I say treatment. You know, it's like for the pH adjustment. A lot of that's been for the groundwater, all right, and a lot of this, some of the surface water has been treated through ponds and then through you know, silt bags and such, and then discharged, right? And what's changed is that now, you know, after you know, and that was our interpretation of the SWIP and the response action plan, is that certain surface water could continue to be managed and have the silt removed, all right? If it's surface water, because it's not going to be impacted. If it was surface water, you just have the sediment load removed and discharged in accordance with the original approved SWIP, okay? But what's changed is that now all the surface water is going to be collected and run through a frac tank as well to improve sediment removal. So I don't know what else we can do.
Just for further context, this isn't just 2 times that Amy came by and saw, you know, poor results. There is an environmental monitor that is engaged by the board that we pay for that comes, I believe, daily, and they provide reports. So it's not like each time that someone came out, they saw something wrong. This is.
Your appearance on site was because of the report from the environmental monitor, isn't it? Yeah.
But if you look at those reports, I mean, I just want to put it in context. Of all the visits, there may have been 2 where there's been turbid water that have not resulted in any impacts, negative impacts to the wetlands. But if you look at the broader picture, it's, I mean, I don't want to pat ourselves on the back,
I
but
want to wrap this up, and I want to be fair. We've always kept this at a very high plane and with good respect and for everybody's professionalism. And you guys are in fact doing a great job. It's a difficult site. And if there's been any suggestion that we're not confident in you folks, that's not the case. I think we do have some isolated situations that you reacted to, and you reacted to them well. And I think the expectation is we need you to continue to do that. We need you to hopefully prevent it like you've been doing most of this process. And, you know, other than the rare occasion. When we set the original enforcement order at 40 NTUs, we understood what this would allow you to do, and that's you maintain less than 40 NTUs, except for storm events that are 2 inches within a 24-hour period. You know what the regs say. We didn't let you do that. We kept it below 40 NTU, period, regardless of runoff or rain events or whatnot. And even in that instance, you had discharge, but it still didn't exceed 40 NTU. Is that fair to say? Yeah, so, I mean,
Is that true?
I don't know what the measurement, it was milky, cloudy water exiting the silt bag.
Do you know what 40 NTU looks like?
I do not.
nobody does. You have to measure it.
I don't. So I'm not, I wasn't, in my enforcement order, I didn't go so far as to say that it was above 40 NTU. I just stated that it was cloudy, milky water. And the silt bags were being taxed.
Let me
I mean,
take a seat.
that's all.
And that improved the situation? Did it improve the situation when they were changed, the silt bags?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So they became overwhelmed. My
Yes.
suggestion is, I mean, is this practical? I think they laid out a method of measuring NTUs in one of the enforcement orders. Could we get a daily reading on the same time every day of the stormwater that's discharging off the site?
We get an hourly reading while the operator's there.
Do-
And we
is
only
that-
do
is that
discharges when the
information that you
operator's
get?
there.
Well, I think the turbid water that I was.
Information reported to our administrator?
Yes, it is, but that. So the stormwater incident, well, good. But what I'm telling you is that the incidents that I was on site for, that I saw the taxed silt bag, was directly coming from the ponded area of the parking lot. It was a direct connection from, they made a makeshift catch basin to drain that parking lot, and it went straight to the silt bag. So, and then it got taxed. And then so cloudy water was exiting at those points.
Not affecting the resource area.
In the end.
In the end.
Right, exactly.
Paul, just for everyone's sake, can you give us what the average turbidity is on normal days? Do you have that generally?
Yeah, I mean, so during the site walk, well, typical, what comes out of the garage is typically a turbidity of around 2 to 5. And the turbidity that comes out of the frac tank system is generally less than 10. So that changes as a function of the volume and the rate that the water goes through the system. The residence time and the velocity of, I mean, it's just, this is Stokes' law in action. So the particulates will drop out as a function of the speed of the water it goes through through the settling area of the tank. We collect, as a general practice, we collect hourly ratings of turbidity and pH, and that's put in the table, and then we have an average turbidity and pH rating for each day. Is it possible at the time of peak storms there are pulses of something that perhaps would be elevated? Yeah, absolutely. And we're doing our best job to try and manage that as best we can.
Say, never exceeding 40.
Not that we know of.
Rarely exceeding, at worst. So I'm gonna ask for something that probably hasn't been asked. Since you guys are comparing data on pH and gonna clean that up, can we just simply get the data set from that October date, including turbidity, and then moving forward, get it just get it every day.
Paul's already provided, which includes that turbidity, I can absolutely
This
plug it on there as
conversation
well.
goes away if we have it as well.
Sure, not a
Well, I
problem.
think that's important to document, because this
That's compliance
more,
with the
this
enforcement
more
order.
recent enforcement order addresses that, addresses turbidity.
We've been, as a general practice, we've been providing the summary table, about every 2 to 3 weeks, we've been forwarding that to you.
The summary table we've been providing all along for the past, what, six plus months, it has hourly turbidity readings in it, pH coming in, pH going out, and.
Well, it's back to here.
And all temperature corrected, yeah.
It's back.
Gets
Goes back,
these
yeah,
along
back to
with
May.
me, and he looks at it, so he's tasked with that. And he'll tell me if there's any spikes or anything like that, so
it's
he's,
already being
he's looking at it as
Then
well.
I'll have to say that I feel a little silly dressing you guys up a little bit over this, because I thought we had some real issues and of non-compliance on the site during construction, which I know can happen, and where training of frac tank operators was mentioned in both enforcement orders. I took that, I interpreted that to mean that maybe we weren't operating
Don't forget,
these
the
frac tanks
the
properly.
the earliest enforcement order, these folks weren't even on board yet. That was the contractor that we were concerned with, who had no capability of dealing with it.
That's why when we have a professionally wastewater grade 6 trained operator that's on the system all the time. Yeah.
So I apologize for wasting your time if this actually is a non-issue.
So, past 22 minutes, I've been trying to wrap this up. Do we have any other questions on the enforcement order, or do we want to take up the discussion on the extension request?
I'm ready to move on to extension, but did you want like a hydrology analysis of the groundwater from the part of the property that's closest to Osgood? That is,
Voted items, right?
We have some initial data requests, and we'll work with Vern and see where we can go. I think we can get some more stuff outside of this.
Yeah, a lot of things that came up in conversation here has already been enumerated right in a email request.
So before you move on from the EOs, so I think my December 31st enforcement order, you guys could vote to rescind, because the April 26, 2019 enforcement order still stands on its own and addresses that issue that I was observing.
What was the date of the one we wanted to send,
December
December
31st,
12/31?
right.
which one is still existing?
April 26, 2019.
Sean, take a shot at it?
So moved. I move that we rescind the December 31st, 2019 enforcement order, but keep in place the conditions set forth in the requirements of enforcement of the April 26, 2019.
Second.
Motion made, second, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Again, the order is rescinded and the order.
And there's no concern about that? I mean, it's
It's redundant.
we're good.
I think yeah, it is a redundant, right. So my January 4th enforcement order specifically addresses the seep and treatment of the seep. It could I don't know, could possibly stand on its own. To continue that treatment, the pumping and the treatment.
Yes. I think that does stay on its own. And that's because of treatment of the seed, that's not for, is it turbidity or for the pH?
No, the pH.
For the pH.
So it's not intermingling and,
I mean, it's specific to that location, but I don't think, we never talked about pH in the earlier enforcement. It does stand on its own, it's still valid.
okay. All right, so if you just vote to ratify.
Vote to ratify it, entertain such a motion.
Vote to ratify the January 4th, 2020 enforcement order.
Second.
Motion made, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, and that passes as well.
And then before we let, I'm sorry, GEI go, we're gonna need installment for continued services for escrow account.
How much?
Great question. We've been doing $10,000 work orders for continuances. If that stands and that's agreeable, I can happy to do it again.
Move for an escrow of 10,000.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to increase the estimate by 10,000, say aye.
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 Opposed, that passes.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much for that was the difficult, and
Extension request?
exactly, the next order of business is the extension request, which is properly before us. It's plenty of time before it expires. They're coming to the conclusion of their first 3-year permit, and we can typically expend for 2 1-year periods.
What are the criteria to look at for an extension?
Well, I guess, thank you. I mean, certainly during extension, you can amend orders, but I mean, given the fact that we have all these enforcement actions that are well memorializing what it is we expect, they become any amendments that we would have normally, might have added. I don't think we would change anything.
I just want to know what the criteria is for us to grant an enforcement or not to. Enforcement to a continuance or not to.
Let me tell you what happens if we don't. The permit expires, the project languishes, they function only under enforcement orders, and I'm not sure that serves anybody's interest properly. What we want is completion of the project and successful stabilization and move on, so I think it's.
You may want something that's not possible, Joe.
One
This is-
thing-
I don't know
one
if
thing's
I've
for
ever- I don't know if
certain-
I've ever said that to you on a project.
One thing's for certain is by not extending it, we're doomed for failure. For certain.
So the criteria is that the wetland flagging needs to be in place, and it is, it's maintained. Filing fee has been submitted. The order has not expired. They submitted before the 30 days required. And then at the time of the request an extension permit, the project must be in compliance with the order of conditions or other permit requirements.
I put here, must be in
Must be in
compliance with the order of
compliance with the order
conditions.
of conditions, yes.
So it says may. This is totally within our discretion. There's nothing, yeah. Well, that's what I was kind of looking for. I don't know if there were things we should look at, or other than those requirements.
To not throw a fly in the ointment, and I don't think it will, I think a review of the existing order conditions with regards to the applicant, ownership, who the parties are, I think that is fair game.
Yeah.
Clarification, especially in light of what we talked about earlier. We had mentioned that it would be done offline. When does this permit actually expire? Is it prior to our next meeting? It's really in a month, six weeks away, right? January, oh, it does expire before the next meeting.
But I think the fact that the applicant submitted the request 30 days prior to this date, way before that, it sort of essentially freezes that expiration. So I wouldn't necessarily say it expires if you're deliberating on that request that was made
I
appropriately.
just offer that because, for clarification of how Sean asked the question, I think that is fair game.
It is, but I mean, that's, what you say is one way to look at it, but is there any, do you have any precedent or any citation to say that you can go ahead and, that it doesn't expire just because we haven't granted it before the expiration date? I wouldn't, that doesn't sound right necessarily.
Would it make sense to grant the extension and then revisit, possibly amending it to add other applicants or parties at a later time?
I'm not sure I want to change anything on that permit. I want to see what it says. I think adding parties only adds confusion and creates potential conflict.
I don't know if it's in the best interest to allow it to expire without having ruled on it before the 12th.
So I'll entertain a motion. Or any other discussion before motions come up?
What do you guys think? I mean, what happens if it expires? Then they have to refile?
You can't extend a file that, a permit that has expired.
Right, right.
I
So they
think
would
we
have to
extend it.
refile.
I think we
Yeah.
extend it.
Okay, are there any additional conditions we want at this point?
No, I think
Con-
the the enforcement orders are those conditions.
What about any conditions concerning the front portion of the property related to the back portion of the property?
That was gonna be research we were gonna do before the next meeting.
And what research is that we would want?
Well, I don't think we would change anything. I think the applicant was who it was.
Yep.
The permit was issued as a permit in its entirety for the entire site
Yep.
to one party. That's a valid permit. Any modifications of that now would add confusion, so I think that's it is. And if it was in fact two separate parties who were involved in it and a single permit was issued, it's the same end result, that the entity is responsible for carrying out the order of conditions. I don't think we change anything on that. I don't know what we gain by doing that.
Right, so what research do you want to do? What information do you want to
I
get?
think it was a
to answer
curiosity.
question?
I
Okay,
think,
curious.
I think it comes down to how it is that they proceed with coordinating construction activities between multiple entities. That's their business decision. Maybe the current owner was perfectly happy to hire this contractor. I don't know what that looks like. I guess maybe not, but I don't know. So I think we leave the permit as it is, as to the parties.
I'm not saying any different here. I'm not saying it should change. I just have the opportunity to grant something, and if there's something that you wanted to clarify or you wanted to know, now would be the time.
I have nothing specific. I think the effort that we put in month after month here, and the enforcement actions and the benchmarking and measurement of success on those actions are those additional conditions that have arisen. And they survive. They survive even an expired order, for that matter.
I am a little concerned that there is not going to be a meeting of the minds between the owner of the front portion and the people dealing with these problems on the back portion, and that we are going to find ourselves in a situation that we would rather avoid. Can you alleviate my concern?
I don't think not renewing the order is going to alleviate that concern either. We aren't going anywhere. Every time there's a request for information, it's provided. I don't know that you.
I know, but I guess my concern is I think we're going to be asking you to do things, and you're gonna come back and tell us that you don't own that property, and you have asked them, and they aren't able to do it.
Well, that's why I suggested letting us gather more information about ownership and plans, and it may be in the commission's interest to add responsible parties so that you have enforcement over them. I'm not suggesting that now, but that may be something to consider once we have all the facts.
Is that a power the commission has to add applicants to an existing order of conditions?
I think so.
Do you
I think
so?
any,
Do you-
I
mean,
think,
have you ever-
I think any part of an order can be modified.
How can you put an onus on a non-applicant to satisfy an order of conditions? It just seems illogical to me.
I think it's an extremely slippery slope to go down
Yeah.
the applications and process and the naming of parties, particularly with regards to modifying or amending under an extension.
Yeah.
The parties are the parties,
I agree.
period.
Yeah.
Leave it at that.
Yeah, I don't think, unless there's a modification of some sort or an amendment, that's the only way it would get added, and,
As I mentioned, we're meeting with the commercial parcel owner. To date, the relationship has been strong.
Yep.
We think that there's opportunities to work together to continue the success that we've had. And we have no reason to believe that's not true. Nor do we have any reason to believe that not extending the order would aid in that effort in any way.
well, you're on the record. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Well, then take a motion, one way or the other, to extend or not.
Move to extend.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to extend the permit for 1 year period from the date of the expiration of this first one. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's extended. Thank you. Appreciate it. I apologize to the folks who are diligently waiting for their own orders of business, but surrender the chair back to Mr. Napoli.
Well, yeah, So the first one will be enforcement on 630 Turnpike Street. I don't, oh, she's still talking. We have to, Amy, the enforcement order on 630 Turnpike Street, we still have to hear that? Because they've already, we heard him as the on his application for his RDA.
I can't recall how you guys voted on the 630 Turnpike enforcement order? Or did you?
Excuse me,
The enforcement order required him to do certain things, including filing, which
Right.
he's done.
Right.
Getting the fence out of there, getting.
I think we continued it, obviously, so once all of the
Okay.
things that we expected within that enforcement order show up on the plan,
So we'll
we
continue
issue a
it.
negative
All right.
determination to implement the plan.
So we'll continue to
I
enforcement
think
order
there's
to the
is there a
January 20th.
discussion on the fines that might take place under this? Oh, we can make it go away. The whole idea was to get his attention to get the
Well, I'm sorry,
project moving.
what did you say, Lou? He's taking her to court?
He's taking her to
They've
court for
appealed
the
the fines.
fines.
They've appealed the
Filing
fines.
appeal
He's
for
gonna
the
appeal the fines.
So just leave him in place, or do you want to rescind him?
Leave him in place.
I agree.
Just let it go. All right,
Yeah, leave him in place.
Yeah.
Clerk registry.
Give
That's
Amy
what
something,
they do.
it'll give Amy something to do. And our town attorney.
So I move to continue.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. 242-1706 Zero Rate Pond and 244 French Farm Road.
So the commission will recall this project is a sewer upgrade within the right-of-way of, within the easement, a sewer easement, running from approximately French Farm down to Ray's Pond Pump Station. The town secured Grenice as the contractor. We performed a pre-construction site inspection before work started. Erosion controls at that time were on-site as spec'd in the order of conditions and installed properly. Ben and I visited the site, when was it? Friday? Friday, yep. And there was some blowouts, there was some failures of the erosion control in a couple of spots. I issued an enforcement order. Grenice responded immediately the next day, cleaned up the areas of sediment that escaped, reinforced a good portion of the stretch with two rows of hay bales. And per the order, I asked for, a construction sediment management plan to go forward because it really is the mud is just, when it gets wet, it's just liquefied mud. So, so the erosion control model did provide an approach going forward. So you have that in your packets. So I have some updated pictures. Grenice contractor is here this evening. If you have any questions. No, that's not,
Actually,
that's
saw
not.
the photographs.
Yep.
I was initially disappointed and then horrified, and I jumped right on and made some comments about the severity of it, and you guys couldn't have possibly read my email that fast, because it seemed like you were already reacting, so thank you.
So, the day before the enforcement order was, provided to us, we shut the project down. We reached out to the environmental monitor. We told them that the site conditions were not manageable. We installed additional erosion controls down gradient, and at that point, our plan was to meet with him on Monday to review them between Thursday afternoon shutdown
In our meeting with him on Monday, we received the enforcement order. I believe in my email, I stated we were gonna be out there Saturday with the environmental monitor. He was not there with us. I misunderstood what he said, but we followed the direction that he gave us to remedy the issue as quickly as possible. The combination of the snow melt and the rain and the location where we are, things escalated quickly, but it was not a continuous neglect. It was a bad day that my foreman.
That was my allegation.
And I'm just, that's, and I can see how you, I mean, it's bad there. And we, again, we put additional wattle and silt fence down gradient, because that's what we had on site for spare erosion control. We sent for an additional 300 or 400 feet, and when we received the enforcement order, that was the action that we took. If we had not received the enforcement order, my assumption is this would have been taken care of on Monday when we met with the environmental monitor, but we stopped immediately, or we stopped that day because we were aware that it wasn't in suitable condition.
So I appreciate the response. That is very admirable. So moving forward, you've got some more construction work to do.
We have about 40% of the pipe remaining. So there was originally 300 feet. There's 120 or 130 feet of pipe left to go.
3-4 days, weather permitting.
It's all about the weather. So at this point, we're monitoring, we basically need cold weather because we need the mud to be frozen. We've been monitoring the weather. It looks like Monday, if we monitor the forecast, the 4 or 5 days prior to Monday, the 20th, appear to be near freezing. The 2 days before it, I mean, I know it's well out there, but it appears to be at freezing, and if we get a few days of cold, we need 1 or 2 days of frozen for us to be able to get in and out of there.
Saturday, we have 47, high 40s, low 50s, some areas near 60 in rain.
But a week from,
That's this coming Saturday.
yes.
So, yeah, so are you prepared for that? Do you
Prepared.
feel the erosion controls that you have there are gonna handle that
I
sort of
do.
runoff?
I
You do?
think that it was, we haven't been driving on it, and that's what the issue was they were driving on it and it splashed up onto the erosion control and then it matted up and we apparently had a blowout. But it's all had time to settle. I don't have any sort of presentation material, but I know we did put a row of straw bales on either side of the existing erosion control, and we cleaned off the existing erosion control, so and we, in the areas where it was bad, we also installed additional bales and silt fence down gradient, so we have, I don't think that there's much more that we,
It's much,
So we-
much
So
improved.
we got a response, we've got
Yep.
ongoing construction to be completed, you've got confidence that in off hours, you're still not gonna be overwhelmed. So the project's complete, and it's winter time, so what is your plan, what's your thought on the erosion controls working throughout the balance of winter and into spring melt off, and then what's your plan in the spring to come back and stabilize? And then ultimately clean up too, right?
Yeah, well, I want to just ask Steve, so originally, so I have a plan up here where the yellow is the original stretch of sewer repair, and then they came back for a modification, so that second section, which is in the black, is additional stretch of pipe that they wanted to do, and we modified that. So I would just want to make it clear that the black section is what you're working on?
currently working on the section of black. If you take a look, I believe it's Old Farm Road up above. That work, that was completed. Yeah, up higher. Sorry, the piece that's outside of the easement and the roadway was completed in the fall last year. At this point, I believe that the funding is available for us to complete the work that's circled in black.
Okay.
At this point, the erosion controls are not installed for the portion in yellow.
In yellow, right,
And-
okay.
But I believe that we were gonna leave that open-ended. So the plan is, at this point, you know, if you see the way that they left it the other day, is as they walked out, they graded behind them. The plan
Yep.
for the winter is to possibly throw down some seed mix and spread out straw.
Straw.
and then in the spring to come back in, we're gonna have to hand place seed.
I know that the slope is pretty steep right at the end of the cul-de-sac, but it's relatively flat coming up, I think, where the course of the piping goes. Do you think it needs tackifier, or do you think straw's gonna get it through the winter? Well, tackifier will definitely be
Yeah,
good, but, you know, does
right.
it need that?
I mean, I really think that. As long as the erosion control stays up and is allowed to, it needs to sit for a few days. I mean, it's gonna, the problem is, when we drive through it, it makes a mess. So we need to, it needs to level out, and then it dries out, and then it's fine.
Okay, I'm all set.
I was surprised when I drove by and saw the mess that was there. I've been in the construction business for a long time, and I know the company, I know you guys, you're pretty reputable in the field. So I was a little surprised, but what I've seen, that you repaired, it looks good to me, so, and you addressed it quickly, so I have no issue with it. But I would hope that you would continue doing this throughout the project, and if you do work in North Andover, do it right the first time, so we don't have a problem, and things go along a lot smoother. Thank you. Deb?
No questions.
Sean?
No questions? I did have one last thing, but I didn't get the answer, I don't think. So we took them through the winter and then stabilization of the soils sometime in the spring. But there were impacts into resource areas. Yes. So what's the remediation?
So,
What's the cleanup of
I
those?
think that just where the larger blowout was at the pond, whatever's left over between the original erosion control and that ring that you made, probably needs some fine tuning in the spring. So,
I think if it dries out.
yeah.
They said it was pretty
Yeah,
muddy
it-
walking through.
Yeah.
Is this raking stuff out, or is this, you know, large volumes? or-
No, I just think it's just leftover that they just couldn't quite get,
Okay.
so I think that could be addressed.
Was there
in-
discharge directly into the pond, or?
There was some. There was some.
Minimal?
Yeah, it wasn't huge, but there was some.
Okay.
Okay, and Amy, the environmental monitor has a plan for construction moving forward. Would that plan be included in the enforcement order?
Yeah, so I was gonna recommend that the commission ratify and amend the enforcement order just to memorialize the erosion control monitor's plan and keep that in place.
Okay, and this is a new plan from this
Yes.
situation?
Yes,
Okay.
yep.
Okay. Motion?
Move that we ratify the enforcement order.
Second.
As discussed.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Great.
And the second
Thank you for
motion
coming.
is to include the construction plan moving forward into the enforcement order.
Sure.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is that your motion?
All in favor, say
Yeah.
aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much for coming in. Thank you. Okey dokey, okey dokey. Oy, 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 oy. All right.
Yeah, whatever.
And last but not least, 242-1765, 2051 and 2053 Salem Street.
So the commission will recall issuing an order of conditions that allowed for additional tree removal that came out of an enforcement situation and restoration. So Ben Osgood had prepared the plan for the applicant, who are here this evening, that showed specific trees marked out to be removed. Commission will recall receiving a letter from Ben Osgood on behalf of the applicant, requesting the commission to reconsider the amount of the bond set, which was $10,000. The commission had requested that the applicant come in with a formal request for a modification to talk about that. That we didn't hear a response after that. And so there was no communication. So yesterday, Field Inspector Ben and I were out at a neighboring site looking at buttoning up for the erosion controls there, and noticed just fresh cut stumps at the subject properties. So they went ahead and did some tree removal, additional tree removal. I believe there's probably more trees in jurisdictional areas than what our previously approved plan provided for or allowed for. And there was more tree removal outside of our jurisdiction on the uplands, but that's probably it is in natural heritage. Unfortunately, I wasn't contacted for a pre-construction meeting. I don't think the order's recorded yet. Bond hasn't been posted, so pre-construction requirements hadn't been met. And I can't quite quantify how many more trees had been removed in jurisdiction. It was a lot. It would have taken us a long time to try to count them all. So, so that's sort of, the summary. So
I don't know where to begin other than to start with, I'm disappointed. I mean, typically a person can go up there and make a mistake, and even at that, we try to treat them fairly and make them understand the error in their ways and try to set them on the right track, and I think we did that. But the result of that was, some money being spent for an engineer and plans and permits, and all of which were pretty crystal clear of what was expected. And to not only not do anything according with that order of conditions, but to go on and do something even further beyond that, can't be explained, and there is no excuse for it. So I don't know what to say other than, it's not so much hiring an engineer to get the permits in place. I mean, you've got a big problem out here. I don't know what possessed you to go out and do more tree clearing after being told you couldn't the first time, and being told, I thought what you understood, that you couldn't do any more, you couldn't have done what you had already done, and now do something even more than that. Add to that, if you had followed the process and requested to do more work, even though it's outside of our jurisdiction, we would have ended up with jurisdiction under natural heritage because of endangered species, or at least the likelihood there's endangered species out in that area. So what was a big problem that we helped you through and worked you through a process to allow you to get what we thought you wanted, I'm not sure we can help you again. And that's all I have to say. I mean, this is bad. Done.
I was taken aback today when I heard about it. You came before us the first, or Ben did. I think you were here.
We came to one meeting.
You did come.
Yeah,
And there were certain trees you wanted to remove, and we told you couldn't remove them because they were in the wetlands. And then you came back for modification because there was the chance there was a couple trees gonna take down, like, they could fall in the garage.
Correct.
And we
Or the
approved
house.
those. So I think there was a total of 6 trees more than what we approved the first time.
Correct.
Then we set everything up. We had an engineered plan. We thought everything was moving in good faith. And then you come in and I'm reading this cover letter, and it says you took down 50 to 60 trees or more. And when natural heritage catches this, it ain't gonna be pretty. I'm sure there's gonna be substantial fines.
I think that Ben filed with Natural Heritage for the trees that you're talking about that are out of, beyond the 200 feet of conservation.
I was not aware of that.
I spoke to him today. He couldn't be at the meeting tonight. We will come with him at the next meeting as well.
Had he filed, or had anybody filed, we are typically notified of that filing. Now, if it just happened recently, it may have crossed in the mail so far, but I don't know if he filed or not, or when he filed.
Well, he filed with Natural Heritage when he submitted the notice of intent.
Way back.
Right,
We're talking about the additional trees. is what I
right,
was
right, yeah, and I don't know if they did or not for the additional trees.
To the best of my knowledge, he did.
The thing number two is that we voted on a set of plans. Now, those plans are junk. So now you're gonna have to pay for Ben to redo us a new plan. So you're gonna pay for that.
I don't think it's about paperwork. I
Well,
think we got a violation then.
It is a violation.
How do you replace trees?
Well,
mature
we'll just
trees?
start, now you're gonna have to replicate, which you can't, because by the time those trees become mature, we'll all be gone. It ain't gonna make any difference, but it's too bad, you know, and you haven't filed, you didn't do a pre-construction meeting, we wouldn't even had this issue, and you didn't post your bond, which is another issue. I can't even attempt to give you any guidance, because there's so many things wrong with it, I don't know where to start.
So I think, so there's levels of jurisdiction here. So we have our buffer zone and our riverfront and our wetland jurisdiction. We have natural heritage, which, you know, I'm new to natural heritage because in Beverly we had no habitat. So I don't know what their MO is when it comes to things like this. The third level is, I talked to Jean Enright, the planning director, and we have a land disturbance permit process, you know, in the town that covers tree clearing, land disturbance, acre or over, that is outside anybody else's jurisdiction.
It's less than 1 acre. The
Okay.
piece that you're talking about,
Okay.
with the trees
all
on the
right.
hill between the
Seemed
houses.
like a lot, but that's fine. So,
Is it 1 acre including what you previously cut?
It's less than 1 acre.
Including what was previously cut a year ago?
Correct. Correct.
so I think,
I mean, that's just a threshold number, wherever it is. It's
right.
Either an acre or it isn't.
So I think, to Lou's point, we do need an updated plan to show new limited clearing, get a handle on, you know, I think for the commission's purposes, we'd want to know how many more trees were cut in our jurisdiction, above and beyond what we previously approved.
To my knowledge, you had 5 on 2053 on my father's side on the hill, the pines. And I believe that there were 8 cut, so there were 3 additional, and this is after speaking to Benny today. There were 3 additional trees that were cut, that he cut. We already have the original plan we were gonna put back, which we would have done already, but when I contacted the nurseries, they had already shut down and we couldn't get access to the specific species and the amounts of them that we have to put back. There were 47 in total, I believe. We have every intention of doing that in the spring, as soon as we can access the plants, as soon as the ground is thaw enough that we can plant them. If in fact, for those 3 trees, whatever the council determines that we need to add on top of that, we are absolutely willing to do that to get into compliance. And in terms of the spot in between the houses on the hill that you spoke about, we had Benny come and meet us at the property, walked it, and he literally ribboned off what was not in the conservation from the Boston Brook, as well as within the 100 feet no-touch zone in the wetlands. So to my knowledge, and through his guidance, we didn't think that we had to get permitted for that, because it wasn't in the wetlands, it was far enough away from the boundaries, as well as the conservation from the Boston Brook from the front of the house. So that's my explanation of it, not, you know, it's not an excuse, that's an explanation.
If all that's true, you might be fine. Can we quantify that there was a violation? I mean, your visual observation is, but I mean, is there?
I think there
Is
are.
it different than what we just
Well,
heard?
I think there are more trees in jurisdiction than what was previously approved. Yes, I do, but,
There are 3 more trees, there are
But-
3 more.
but,
At
Data
2053,
aside, those are
correct.
just counting stumps and bean counting. The reality is, you've got an order of conditions, resulted from an enforcement order, that required you'd have a pre-construction meeting to post bond, to have erosion controls in place, to put together a forecast of what you're gonna do, and again, you went to the nursery and that, but at some point in time, it went from planting new stuff and cleaning up what I had to, I wanna take more trees down. That is the violation, it's that and that alone. No bond, I'm not sure it's been recorded, not recorded, no pre-construction meeting, those are all violations of the order of conditions, and the action moving forward only solidifies those violations. So whether it's one tree or 3 trees, I suppose we went out there and dug a hole, and it would be in violation of the order, because he didn't do any of those other things.
We will file, we will go and file the Registry of Deeds. I spoke to Benny about it today. He's gonna help us with the paperwork. We will get that filed. Again, we're willing to add more trees in the restoration, whatever you deem for the 3 extra trees that were cut. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't like we were trying to pull anything. We're just trying to maintain our land. We're not developing the land. It's undevelopable. I mean,
The second one, you said there were 3 jurisdiction, trees that were cut within jurisdiction, then it was qualified by at 2053.
correct.
What about outside of 2053? Were there trees cut?
The trees that were cut is 2051, which is right next door, were the pines that Mr. Napoli had spoke about.
Are those within jurisdiction?
Those are within jurisdiction,
are
correct. But we had permission to cut them.
Okay.
We were approved to cut those trees.
Under the order of
Under the
Under the
5.
order of conditions. And again,
The 5.
The fact that they were
The
cut.
5.
I'm
other
not,
things in place.
this is all new to us. I mean, honestly, we want to be in compliance. We're not trying to pull a fast one. We live there. I'm renovating the house at 2051 in the spring. I'm going to be moving there with my family. The reason that we cut outside of the jurisdiction up on the hill, and that I had our engineer come and make absolutely sure that it's not in conservation land and within the boundaries of the wetlands, is because I want to put a lawn and I want to put a garden up there. I have a 3-year-old daughter, she'll be 3 next week. There's not a lot of yard there. I want a space for her to be up away from the road, to be able to play, to be able to ride her bike and such. It's not development, again, it's for a lawn and for a garden. And the reason, I'm sorry, go ahead. And I was just gonna say, the reason that we wanted the trees down at 2053 as well as 2051 was because they were encroaching on the house. And God forbid, they come down, they're gonna destroy either of the houses, or if somebody's in the yard, they're gonna kill somebody. These were huge trees, especially the pines, but as well as the oaks around 2053 at my dad's house. So,
Which you had permission to take down.
correct, yes, sir.
This
In
all
terms
was-
of not filing-
This all was preventable had you understood your order conditions that you had.
I agree.
Read it, and it's all spelled right out, in order, of
To
what
me,
you need to
reading
do.
that, though I'm a stonemason, I am in construction, it might as well like be reading Chinese. So I went on on Benny's referral to it. And I thought that we were within our rights. We both did.
So if I can understand the order in which things happened, you had, when you came in front of us, you were still planning to do all that clearing outside of the 100 and 200, correct? Right from the get-go, but it just wasn't in front of us because it wasn't within our jurisdiction and it's not, it wasn't within our jurisdiction, right?
Correct.
Yep.
I specifically asked Benny, and literally, he physically came, we
marked
walked
it.
in there,
Yep.
and he ribboned it.
Yep.
He said, Lee, this is what you can cut, everything on the outside of the ribbons has to stay, which is exactly what we did.
And then, when did you first become aware of the National Heritage issue?
Benny told us about it because he said that we had to file with National
Back then,
Heritage,
yep.
which he did.
Which you did.
Which he did.
And they came back and they said that, but the filing was just, had nothing to do with the trees outside of the 100, 200 at that time, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So you filed with National Heritage, telling them we're gonna just take down the 5 trees. They came back without a comment. No impact. And but then after, did you make National Heritage aware that you were gonna take down all the trees outside of the 200?
I believe that he did, but I can't speak for him. And like I said, I spoke to him today. He was unable, he had a prior obligation, Benny, this evening. So he said he would come to us with the next meeting. In the interim, we will file. I'll put the sign up with the department number and such on it. And again, we are more than willing to add to the restoration what you deem for taking the 3 extra trees that were not approved at 2053.
And I think one of the conditions was posting a bond.
Yes, and he actually, I'm glad you said that, because he is gonna fill the paperwork to amend or change the bond, because quite honestly, we felt that $10,000 was astronomical for yard maintenance. Seeing that the lot that my dad sold to the Inneses next door, who cleared the acre to put a house up, you only asked for $3,000. So it just seemed astronomical to ask him for $10,000, you know? $1,500, $3,000, from what research we did, seemed to be the norm, which we're more than happy to. It's not like we don't want to give you your bond, and we absolutely will. But we're gonna try to, he's gonna, whatever the paperwork is called.
The irony on the bond here is to flex and hopefully shore up the ability to get compliance. And in every instance, everybody's expectation is to get every penny of it back.
Of course,
Yeah, every penny of it back.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
the fact that it wasn't posted and we have a violation sort of solidifies or underscores the importance of why we need it. But maybe not at that dollar level, but,
Which we're fully willing to. We're fully willing to give you the bond. We just thought, again, as talking about it and even speaking with Benny, we thought the $10,000 for homeowners, not a builder who's building, not any kind of development to the property, it's maintaining our property and protecting our houses.
Has Amy or anybody gone back to check how we came up with the 10?
we were
Yeah,
involved in it. No, we recognized the amount of disturbance that was already out there. It was
Yep.
already a violation.
Yep, already
And we
violated.
thought there was a vulnerability. We thought it was gonna be done quick enough that they'd be able to get in, get out, and get the money back.
Yep.
But we felt that there was a threat that if
It's
it was to languish, if it was to languish any length of time, there was a threat on that slope
There
that,
was a violation to start.
Right.
They did tree clearing before they even filed, they were gonna do the houses over. So they started with the left foot, right from the get-go. So it was my opinion that
That's the kind of thing that'll do it, get that bond
And
back.
I understand that, but again, like we said before, my father has lived there, my family has been there since 1957 or 1958. He was unaware that he had to file to cut trees. I mean, he grew up with my grandfather cutting trees and maintaining the property. So at 72 years old, he had no idea. He hadn't been to a town meeting probably.
I didn't realize I had to ask permission to cut trees down on my own land.
And in terms of the
I
wetlands,
never did
again, he,
before. When I was a young man living at home, if we needed to cut a tree, we went out and we did it, and we would maintain the land.
correct.
And I just figured that's how it was. I had no idea that you people even existed. My
Honestly,
ignorance,
I'm a little
that-
bit happier than you, but a lot has changed in my life, so a little bit more has changed in yours.
and, yeah, those days are gone.
And again, we completely, we want to be compliant, we want to make the town happy. I mean, I grew up here, I'm moving back here so that my young 3-year-old can be in the town and be in the school system. We're not developing the property, we simply are trying to maintain. And apologize for our ignorance.
Order conditions that's in place. We don't ask them to file a new order of conditions for this additional work. We order them under this enforcement order to amend the existing order conditions to reflect the additional changes. And then reopen the hearing, potentially, or at least for discussion.
I was thinking that they, post a bond, have a site review, just like before, this hasn't even happened. So, and then have a new set of plans that we can review and see where the trees are, where they are. We're going by, he's saying 50, 30, 20, 3.
I need to quantify what it really is.
We really have to know.
When Betty comes at the next meeting, which again, we'll file everything and get as compliant as we can before the next meeting on the 21st, I believe you said it was, Benny will be able to explain more in terms of that, as he has done all the engineering and all the plans for this.
So what are you gonna do on the site between now and that next meeting? You gonna do anything out of there? You cut any more trees?
No, everything is complete. The only thing we will do, long as it's permittable, is some cleanup. In other words, some of the branches and the limbs that are left in Dad's yard and stuff, you know what I mean? But again, if you'd like us to wait till after the meeting, we're more than happy to do that as well.
Cleaning up of slashes in the frozen ground conditions is probably the best time to do it. And it's pulling it out. You're not going up there with machines, are you?
No.
they've already cut. This is just limbs.
It's
and
just
stuff
brush.
that-
In other words, he
took
cut
a
the
lot
trees,
out.
it's just the limbs, like you limb the trees, and then he took the trees out, it's just the limbs that are left remaining. We're gonna
Stumps are
leave them.
gonna
We're gonna
remain.
leave them.
I was not gonna remove the stumps.
Yeah.
I was not gonna grind the stumps.
Yeah, we're just gonna leave them.
I think cleaning up of the slash that's on the ground.
Yes, that's what I was
By
talking.
hand and not, with no machines in there, chainsaws are certainly okay, but No wheeled machines or track machines in there.
No
I'd
wheeled
be
machines,
inclined-
because what he had in there is he had a small skid steer, a rubber-tired skid steer with just forks on it. And what he had done before when he was there is he made piles, with the machine, just brush piles, which we'll leave there to decompose and turn into compost,
You want to do anything out there before we have communications with National Heritage?
2 weeks, we got 2 more weeks. Let's just,
He's got plenty of time.
let's just got the 2 weeks right out to the next meeting. Don't do anything out there.
So, and again, we'll be in contact with Benny, we will file, we'll,
I thought we were in compliance at 2051, because we have the.
I
plot plan
believe
where
that we
the
are.
trees
I
have
think
to
the
go.
only hinging is when and if he filed with Heritage. Because again, it's not in,
But you went before us, but you haven't done anything, you haven't gone, you didn't do pre-construction, you didn't push the bond, what else is there?
Wasn't aware I had to post the bond, I was never told. I-
no, that's the $10,000 down. We are aware that we have to post a bond. Benny has to file to whatever it's called, to motion, to try to reduce it.
Addresses? Single filing for both addresses or 2 separate filings? All right, so the order is the order, regardless of address, you're in violation of
Exactly.
the order, period.
Exactly.
For both addresses, you're in
Right.
violation.
So I
For the
would,
pre-construction requirements.
Yeah.
the fines wouldn't occur, we haven't incurred any fines, so we just got so we're not gonna do that. But if we don't have anything for the next meeting, then we will start enforcement with fines. I think we should.
Okay.
You have our word, and again, I spoke to Benny at length today. You will have everything you need on our end in terms of the paperwork and the filings, absolutely by the next meeting.
Look, you have to understand, that we're not trying to penalize you individually, but if we let everybody in this town just go randomly cut trees.
It would be bare, I understand.
It would be terrible.
I agree. I agree. And again, the piece of property that Dad has now, I want to say it's 10.2 or 11.2 acres, including your house, which we're not going to touch. We're going to leave as open land, open forest. It's undevelopable, and, we're going to keep it as open land and wildlife land, I grew up hunting there, I still hunt there my
No, I
whole
know, I
life,
mean, then we're getting back to natural heritage. You cut the woods in the natural heritage. That was a path for deer and coyote and fox and turtles.
That's what
and-
Heritage is concerned themselves with that. They're looking at, truly endangered and threatened species.
Right.
And, they're looking at it from a different perspective. They're looking for migrations from the upland woodland areas to vernal pools to the brook. And there are, that part of town actually has well, they're there. The species are there and using that
The
land.
land that you sold next to the piece of land you sold, there was a vernal pool in the back, remember?
Yeah, we just heard of
And we had to
There's a
go,
picture that
and
showed
we had to, those people had to go through hell to make sure that, and we made sure that stayed the same.
I remember that because when they actually cleared it, there was a whole swath back section behind the house that was left untouched. I remember.
That's further up the hill. A little further up the hill, yeah.
But, that's the part that we have to, what? You gonna go? What, do you got a date?
It's late.
Just, let's get going.
It is
So
late.
the expectations for the next meeting are clear. The enforcement order needs to be ratified. They understand what that means. We're not gonna allow anything, so I move that we continue this enforcement order. First, we'll ratify it.
Right.
Move to ratify the enforcement order as written.
All filings between now and the next meeting.
Okay, so we have
Bond.
a motion and a,
Second.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. And we have to ratify, that ratified the enforcement order, right?
That's it, we don't really need to continue, we should continue.
And then we're gonna continue till the next meeting.
So moved. Email them attached now as well.
Second.
It's mine.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous.
Nice to meet you.
And, okay, and also,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say, you're a landowner. That doesn't mean that you could do anything that you want on your land. Okay, so the thing is, it used to, but okay, and, sir, I turned 71 yesterday. So, thank you. So,
Things have changed.
things have changed, and I've lived in this community for over 40 years. And you just have to be, you know, ahead of all of these things and everything. So, and in your tax bill, in your property tax bill, there was a boilerplate that said, if you want to take any trees down on your property, go see the conservation agent. So you definitely have to,
I don't know if
you
Danny
know.
never read that. I know that when they
Yeah.
get the taxes in every quarterly, they come down and give the check immediately, and
Okay. Yeah, but with environmental rules and everything. you
believe me,
really-
we're aware of it now,
Okay.
and it will never happen again.
Okay.
I promise you
So
that.
you're gonna be continued to January 22nd,
Okay,
all right? In the meantime, talk to Amy, or Ben, talk to Ben.
please, yeah.
Make sure all the i's are dotted and t's are crossed, so we don't have any surprises. And then, once we get a plan, then we can,
Are we expecting a modified plan by
we
January
better,
22nd?
we better, because they cut down a million trees.
Okay.
And bond, and Benny,
or-
again,
or-
Benny is gonna file, as soon as possible to try to lessen the bond.
Requirements in the original ordinance
Pre-construction
need to be
requirements met.
in order for us to address the modification.
Okay.
Okay.
Which, again, though, that meaning the trees that need to be planted, I can't access them until spring.
No,
No, no,
pre-construction.
yeah,
Pre-construction, oh, okay,
stuff.
okay.
Right, right, right,
Okay.
right.
You know, signs,
Right.
recordings,
And-
bonds,
But I want to be
meetings.
clear, you guys are expecting a modified plan with updated information on
Correct.
what's been cleared so far. And I think you should get that information, even if it's out of our jurisdiction, or
We'll send
wetland
it anyway.
jurisdiction,
I'll have Benny-
because planning's gonna need to know too.
Okay.
So let's get that question off the table right away. If it's less than an acre, great, because then you won't have to do.
If you can
Yeah.
relay this to
Okay.
Benny in email, just to
Sure,
make sure
absolutely.
that by the next
Yep.
meeting, we have everything
My lot
covered.
of 2053 is an acre,
Okay,
and we
okay,
only cleared on the hill.
all right,
I'd say, I would almost
Okay,
dare to
we'll
say it's
just-
less than a
just
half
make
acre
sure.
that I cleared on the hill.
all right, we just gotta make sure, that's all.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
wanna keep you out of trouble.
Yeah,
Planning board?
We want to be out of trouble.
All right, and I will communicate with Ben.
Yeah, please, just so, again, because I'm
on
not,
the update.
this
No,
isn't my
that's
forte.
fine, that's
So
fine.
that way, I just want to make sure, for Dad's sake, that
Yeah.
everything is in order for the next meeting.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Okay,
very much.
All right, thank you for coming in.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay,
you for your time.
thanks. Okay, thank you. Sorry about the wait.
It's okay, thank you very much.
All right,
Good
thank you.
thing.
Thank you, have a good night.
Let's take a recess for a few minutes till Doug gets back.
Yeah. Well, we gotta do decisions. We can sign up, we can look at them, right?
Yeah, we can look
We
at it.
can start talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, let's
We don't have
start.
to vote, wait till she votes, she's good.
Do I have, I don't have those.
Just can't vote them.
Did I have, decisions in my packet?
Take mine, no mine?
Take that one. I don't care.
I read 'em. They look good.
Which ones are they? Yeah,
Nice job, Amy, on the decisions.
yeah. I saw these, I think. Okay, so we can't vote on, so these hers, yours?
Those mine. You can have them. I have those.
I don't want my, I have faith in my
500?
500.
Address, 500 Great Pond Road.
All those in favor say aye.
We just voted you off.
Thank you, I don't have to go to any other meetings now.
That's the one we're doing, 500.
Okay. No, these are not yours. Oh, oh,
You should wash your hands after you go to the bathroom.
We're getting punchy now.
okay, let's go. Get it,
Yes,
move on.
and
Okay.
and the camera person tells us we're on the air,
I know.
so everybody in town knows now you don't wash your hands.
So I asked them to permanently mark the no disturb zone associated with the perennial stream and lake shore with wetland markers to be placed 50-foot intervals on existing mature trees or vegetation. Is that all right?
What, number is it?
51.
We didn't require any barriers out there, did we?
Physical barriers? No.
No, okay.
Nope.
Is 50 feet intervals okay, or should it be shorter, or? I feel like a long stretch, I don't know. Yeah, okay.
Isn't usually 25?
So,
Interval,
I
distance
think,
between
I think moving forward, I want to place as a boilerplate, when we talk about other permits must be in place, I'd like to have the ability to not sign off on a building permit until I get a pre-construction meeting on site. I'd rather have that as like a carrot, that I'm not gonna sign off on this until I get on site with you guys. We have pre-construction meeting, everything's in sight, and then I can go back to the office and I'll click it off and give you the green light.
So Form U is like an applicant's letter of interest. I want to do a project. It starts with the building inspector, right? He starts the Form U process, or can it start
Yes.
with anybody? Starts with him.
Yeah,
So he determines whether you gotta go to zoning, and at some point, if he has to go to zoning, that's his
Yeah.
jurisdiction, or it goes to planning, or it comes to us. But it's only determined by circling it through. So isn't the presumption, once we've signed off on it, we don't sign off on it till they come here.
right, right.
But once he gets his order of conditions and we've signed off and said, yeah, he's jurisdictional, that normally would trigger the building inspector of issuing the permit. You're saying you want him to sit on it a little bit longer, so it is that we do our pre-construction meeting.
Right.
We've had discussions that a building permit shouldn't be issued until a certificate of compliance. I mean, until it's been
The order.
closed by us. Outstanding, the orders have been closed. Because what's happening is occupancy permits are being granted with outstanding orders.
Who did I have this conversation with? Was it you earlier today?
Yeah.
Because I've had this conversation already
Yeah.
today with some
Yeah.
completely unrelated.
So I don't think that's right.
The problem is it happens all the time.
Well, we're trying to fix it.
You're not gonna fix it.
We're not?
Because we have no standing in the building code. And we have no standing in the permitting of issuing an occupancy permit. You've got folks whose closings are all forecasted and move-in dates and loans and everything else are all out there on a horizon that's known. Yet how many times have we seen they come in for a certificate of compliance 5, 6, 10, 15 years later, only because they're refinancing?
Or they're selling their house.
You're never gonna get, you can't.
It's hard.
People finish their house in the hope of moving in for Christmas, yet they still have to come into compliance in the spring, and a couple more years of growing seasons. You cannot hold up an occupancy permit. It's just wrong, first of all, and legally, you can't. There are other ways to get compliance, there are other ways to get assurances that when they move in, that they're reminded of their obligation. Maybe we can require an affidavit that they have to sign that reminds them of their obligation of the order of conditions, though they get an occupancy permit. Maybe that becomes a standard condition,
Yeah,
but you
That's
cannot hold
interesting.
up an occupancy certificate. Sorry.
I can think of one.
That's a
part.
philosophical question for another
Yeah.
night.
Let's table that for another
Yeah.
night, it's late.
Yeah, she's getting thirsty over here, and she's gonna start kicking me.
It's over.
No, it's
So-
all, you know what, it's good.
Make a motion. You have with the decision? Hello?
What?
Are you happy with that?
Yeah.
Then make a motion.
Okay, I move that we, are there any other issues with this?
Go on,
OOC? Okay, so I move that we accept 500 Great Pond Road, 2421777 as written and amended.
I second it. I don't know if there was an amendment to it,
There
but
wasn't
as
an
drafted,
amendment.
as drafted.
As
If
drafted.
any.
Second.
As drafted.
Aye.
Opposed, that's unanimous.
Okay, the next.
so this is the in-ground pool. And removal of the play structure. Jack Sullivan said that they're gonna remove it, so I said I'll put it right inside the decision.
This is the one resulting out of the enforcement order?
No. This is, no,
All right,
no.
I was confusing it with another one.
We just held this up.
Okay, got it, yeah, I remember this now. Sorry.
Then moving
We'd
on to
already approved it.
33.
33,
And
yes.
It said something about
Yep.
the vernal pool. Is it or isn't, is it not present?
Well, yeah, there's an assumption that there is, but it's just not documented. It's a potential vernal pool.
Well, it should be documented if it's a vernal pool.
Okay. So
Is it on-site
Would-
or is it off-site?
it's off-site.
Off-site?
It's
You
off-site.
can't obligate these guys to certify for
No.
someone
Okay.
else's property.
So
Right.
so I just wanted to, make sure, are we gonna operate on the assumption that it is a vernal pool? We're just gonna assume that it is?
And they did as well in their
Yeah,
application,
they
right?
did,
Yeah.
yeah. All right.
Even though it isn't documented.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good
Okay.
job.
Motion.
I move that we grant the order of conditions for 805 Forest Street, DEP file number 242-1776 as drafted.
Second.
And amended, because we threw the yes versus maybe.
Motion made,
All those
second.
in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that's unanimous.
Motion to,
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that's unanimous.
All right, it's 10:15.